I opened my eyes to freezing cold and crumbling mud walls. Frost hung from the straw roof. I was back in 1960, the worst winter of my life. My little sister Tsuetsue was shaking beside me on the brick bed. She was 9, but looked like skin and bones. In her arms was Yaya, only 4 years old, barely breathing, her face white as paper. The memories hit me all at once. Mom and Dad died 2 years ago. We had no food left. Last time I lived through this day, Yaya starved to death right here on this bed. Tsuetsue cried until she went blind, and she didn't make it past spring either. I wasted my whole life full of regret after that. But now I was back. Something, God, fate, whatever, gave me a second chance. I bit my lip until it bled. This time, nobody touches my sisters. Then something strange happened. A sharp pain split my head open, and suddenly I could see through things. Through the blanket, through the walls, through the empty rice jar. I had some kind of X-ray vision. I didn't waste time being shocked. I needed food. Now, my eyes found it. A mouse hole under the wall, half a meter deep. Inside, a small pile of peanuts the mouse had stored for winter. I jumped off the bed barefoot and tore into the wall with my hands. My fingernails broke and bled, but I couldn't feel it. I dug and dug until I pulled out a handful of dirty, shriveled peanuts. Maybe 3 or 4 ounces. To me, it was gold. Stealing food from a mouse. That's what survival looks like in this hell. If you want to live, you have to be meaner than an animal. I told Tsuetsue to shell them. She stared at the peanuts like they were treasure, swallowing hard, her hands shaking as she cracked them open. I chewed a few into paste and tried to feed Yaya, but her jaw was locked tight. She needed warm water, but we had no firewood. I scooped snow from the windowsill into a bowl and tried to melt it in my hands. Useless, too cold. Then I felt something else in my mind. A space, like a small empty room floating inside my head. I tried putting the bowl in there. It vanished from my hands and appeared inside that space. I pulled it back out, and the snow had melted into warm water. I didn't question it. I fed the warm water and peanut paste to Yaya, drop by drop. A few minutes later, her eyelids flickered. Hungry, she whispered, thin as a thread. Tsuetsue burst into tears. I split the peanuts into 2 piles, the bigger one for Tsuetsue, the smaller for me. She tried to argue. I glared at her so hard she flinched and started eating. Those peanuts wouldn't fill anyone's stomach, but they were a spark. Enough to keep us alive. Yaya woke up a little. Still weak, but there was light in her eyes again. She grabbed my finger and tried to lick the peanut taste off it. My heart felt like it was being cut with a knife. I stood up and looked through the cracked door. Snow everywhere, burying the world. The village was dead silent, not even a dog barking. People had eaten the dogs long ago. These peanuts would only buy us one more day. Tomorrow, when the snow stopped, I'd go into the mountains. There were wolves, wild boar, all kinds of animals up there. Before, I was too afraid to go. But I already died once. What's left to fear? I looked back at my 2 sisters huddled under the torn blanket. If I ever let them go hungry again in this life, I don't deserve my name. Then Tsuetsue's voice cut through, shaking with fear. Brother, someone's coming. Footsteps crunching through snow. Then a massive bang, someone kicking our door. Wang Yi, you dead yet? Open the damn door. It was my uncle, Wang Changwei, my father's own brother. After Mom and Dad died, he took everything worth taking from our house. Furniture, supplies, even our last half bag of cornmeal. Now he was here because he figured the snow had finally killed us, and he wanted the house. Family. In times like these, that word means nothing. I clenched my fists. My eyes could have killed him. The door was about to break from the kicking. I told Tetsue to stay quiet, then grabbed a fire poker from under the stove. Hard jujube wood, one end burned black like iron. I yanked the door open. My uncle Wang Changwei stumbled in with the cold wind. He wore a thick black cotton coat, way better than anything we had. His face was all meat and meanness, snot frozen in his beard. He glanced at the bed, saw Yaya was still alive, and didn't even bother hiding his plan. It's too cold for you kids here, he said. Go sleep in the animal shed out back. I need this house to store firewood. Right. He was stealing our home. In this weather, losing the house meant death, even if you had food. I stood in the doorway blocking his path, the poker hanging at my side. I didn't say a word. He reached out to shove me. Move it. His hand never touched me. I raised my head and stared straight at his neck. My X-ray vision kicked in. I could see right through him. Red muscle, white bone, the fat artery on the side of his neck pulsing with every heartbeat. One swing of this poker and his blood would hit the ceiling. My fingers tightened on the wood. I lifted it 1 inch. Something changed in his eyes. He'd beaten me plenty of times before. I used to be scared of him like a mouse scared of a cat. But today he saw something different. Something like a lone wolf in the mountains. His hand froze in midair. He actually stepped back. "Uncle," I said, my voice colder than the wind outside. "Take one more step. See what happens. No anger. No begging. Just calm. The kind of calm that makes your skin crawl." He stumbled back, almost tripping on the doorstep. Called me crazy, but his voice had no bite left. Then he turned and ran faster than a rabbit. Didn't even leave a threat behind. If you're soft, people walk all over you. If you don't want to be bullied, you have to be hard. I spat on the ground and slammed the door shut. But he came back. The moment his fear wore off, his pride kicked in. A grown man, scared by a 19-year-old kid who never talked back? He couldn't swallow that. He charged the door like a bull. The old wood couldn't take it. One side popped off its hinge and hung crooked. Snow and freezing wind poured in. Tsue screamed and pressed herself and Yahello into the corner. This time he didn't hesitate. He rolled up his sleeves and went straight for the bed, for my sisters. "You ungrateful brat. I'm your uncle. I'm looking out for you. Now get to the shed before this roof kills someone." I didn't swing the poker. He was too close to the girls. I might hit them by accident. Instead, my eyes landed on a brick propping up the table leg. I pulled it into my space with a thought. Gone. Then I pushed it back out, right in front of where his foot was about to land. No warning. The brick appeared out of thin air. His full weight came down on the sharp edge. His ankle twisted, his body lurched forward, and he had nothing to grab. He fell face first into the wooden table. The crack was sickening. He grabbed his mouth and screamed like a slaughtered pig. Blood and spit everywhere. When he pulled his hands away, 2 of his front teeth were snapped in half, lying in the mud on the floor. Tsue was frozen. She'd been watching the whole time. The floor was empty 1 second, then a brick appeared from nowhere. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. I stood over him, looking down, cold as ice. "Uncle," I said, "the floor's uneven. Watch your step." He tried to curse at me, pointing with a bloody hand. But every time he moved his mouth, the pain nearly killed him. He scrambled to his feet, didn't even pick up his broken teeth, and ran out the door holding his face. Blood dripped through his fingers all the way down the path. This time, he didn't look back. I propped the door closed with a log and turned to Tsue. Her face was white as chalk. "Brother, that brick, it's nothing," I said, letting the hardness drop from my face. I walked to the bed and touched Yaya's forehead. The bad man got what he deserved. Heaven punished him. I couldn't explain the brick. In times like these, some secrets have to stay buried, even from the people closest to you. Outside, the sky was getting dark. My stomach growled again. Those few peanuts were already gone. But watching my uncle run away with a mouth full of blood didn't scare me. It woke something up inside me. Something harder. Something meaner. You can't spend your whole life on defense. If he came for my house first, then I'd go for everything he has. In a world that eats people alive, being kind gets you killed. The only way to survive is to hit back twice as hard. Late that night, the snow finally stopped. The village was dead silent, like a graveyard. I lay on the bed listening to my sisters breathe. Tsue kept twitching in her sleep, still shaken from what happened with our uncle. Once I was sure they were deep enough asleep, I got up without making a sound. I wrapped my torn coat tight and tied it with a rope around my waist to keep the wind out. I found the mountain knife in the dark. The blade was ice cold, but it made me feel bold. I didn't take it though. Tonight wasn't about killing. Tonight was about taking back what was mine. I slipped out the door like a cat and moved through the shadows along the walls. Nobody was awake. The whole village slept early to save lamp oil. My uncle's house was right next door, just a short mud wall between us. I climbed over without a sound. Being young and skinny had its advantages. I was quick. I crouched against his back wall, pressed my hand to the frozen mud, and switched on my X-ray vision. Pain swelled in my head, but I pushed through it. The wall turned transparent. Inside, everything glowed faintly green, like night vision. Uncle Changwei was lying on the bed with his mouth swollen up like a sausage, groaning in pain from his broken teeth. His wife was snoring like a dead pig beside him. I didn't care about them. I scanned the room like a searchlight. Closet, just old clothes. Stove, empty. Where did this bastard hide his food? Then I spotted it. Under the big wooden chest at the head of the bed, beneath a green brick, there was a hollowed-out space. Inside sat a small cloth bag, stuffed full. From the shape of the grains, it was millet. Fine grain. I remembered exactly where it came from. When Mom and Dad died, the village gave us relief grain, including dozens of pounds of millet. Uncle took every bit of it, said he'd keep it safe for us, never gave back a single grain. That millet was always ours. I pressed my palm flat against the wall, as close to the hiding spot as I could get. About 1 meter away. My space power had limited range. I held my breath, reached out with my mind through the wall, through the wooden chest, and locked onto that bag. Take it. My mental space shook slightly. The bag vanished from under the brick and appeared inside my space. A needle of pain stabbed my brain. Pulling things through walls drained me hard. I nearly collapsed right there. I checked my space. The blue cloth bag was sitting quietly in the corner. Got it. Inside the house, Uncle Changwei stirred and mumbled something. I froze against the wall, not even breathing. After a long moment, he went back to groaning in his sleep. I smiled coldly. Before I left, I scraped a piece of frozen dog shit off the ground and used my power to drop it right into the hole where the millet used to be. Fair is fair. Tomorrow when he finds his precious grain turned into dog shit, I'd pay good money to see his face. I crept back home the same way I came and crawled into bed. Suitsue rolled over in her sleep and grabbed the corner of my coat. I touched the bag of millet in my space. About 5 or 6 pounds. Enough to last a while. Tomorrow morning, I'd make porridge for my sisters. I woke before dawn, the sky just turning pale in the east. Best sleep I'd had since coming back to this life. Having food does that, settles the heart. I got up quietly, fixed the broken door, and stuffed every crack with old rags. In times like these, the smell of cooking could bring hungry wolves to your door, the humankind. I pulled the millet out of my space. Golden grains, every one plump and round. I took just 2 handfuls and put the rest back. No water in the house, so I broke some clean icicles from the roof and dropped them in our cracked clay pot. Getting a fire going was a struggle. The wood was damp and I barely had any matches left. I used the last bit of dry grass to get a flame, then carefully set the pot over it. The ice melted. The water boiled. I dropped in the washed millet. Soon, a smell I hadn't known in forever filled the room. The real smell of grain, slightly sweet, rich, warm. I stirred the pot, watching the grains roll and bloom and thicken into porridge. Every little bubble that popped sounded like the most beautiful music in the world. Brother, Yaya woke up first. Her little nose twitched, her eyes flew open wide, and she scrambled off the bed barefoot, running to the stove. It smells so good. Brother, what are you cooking? Suitsue woke up too, sitting there wrapped in the blanket, staring at me like she was dreaming. Don't move. Put your clothes on first. I barked at them, strict but smiling. No clothes, no food. I've never seen 2 kids get dressed so fast in my life. They sat on the edge of the bed, for big eyes locked on that clay pot, not even blinking. I could hear them swallowing. I set the pot on the little table. 3 of us around one pot. Eat. Yaya shoved her face right up to the pot and tried to lick it, burned her tongue, and pulled back, but she was grinning from ear to ear. Suitsue blew on a tiny bit of porridge over and over before putting it in her mouth. The millet was cooked until it had a layer of oil on top, smooth and warm going down. The second it hit her tongue, tears rolled down her cheeks and splashed into the pot. Why are you crying? I picked up the pot and took a big gulp. Warmth spread through my stomach and I felt like a living person again. Brother, it's so good. Suitsue wiped her tears, half crying, half laughing. Better than New Year. Will we ever get to have this again? Yes, I said. I wiped the porridge from Yaya's chin. Not just porridge. Someday there'll be meat. New clothes too. Yaya looked up at me, rice paste all over her mouth, her eyes curved into little moons. Brother is the best. Brother is the best. Brother is the best. Looking at their happy faces, the stone on my heart finally got a little lighter. The pot was empty fast. Yaya hugged it and licked the bottom clean with her little tongue. Not a single drop of porridge oil wasted. Full bellies, warm bodies, color finally coming back to their cheeks. I stood up and looked out through the window crack. The sun was out, blazing off the snow, almost blinding. The storm was over. 5 or 6 pounds of millet could last maybe half a month if I stretched it. But that wasn't enough. To survive in this world, to live like a human being, I needed more than millet. I needed meat. I needed money. My eyes went to the mountains behind the village. The long, rolling ridges of the Chombai Range. Live by the mountain, eat from the mountain. If you've got the guts, the wilderness will feed you. Tsuitsue, lock the door tight. I grabbed the hatchet from the corner and a slingshot for hunting birds. Hatchet for close range, slingshot for distance. Perfect combination. I tucked them both in my belt. If anyone knocks, don't open. If uncle comes again, scream for help. Brother, where are you going? Tsuitsue stood up, her face tight with worry. I tightened my belt and felt my eyes go sharp. Into the mountains. To find a way for us to survive. I had just strapped the hatchet to my belt when the screaming started next door. My grain. It was worse than a pig being slaughtered. Uncle Changwe had found his surprise. Then came the crashing. Pots, bowls, everything hitting the floor. His wife started screaming too. Who stole my life savings? You heartless thief. I stood by the door and let myself smile. Just a little. But I didn't go outside. No point showing my face. Better to sit back and watch the show. Brother, what happened? Tsuitsue's face went white, chopsticks slipping from her fingers. Did someone die at Uncle's house? Nobody died. But he probably wishes he had. I waved her over. Come here, let me braid your hair. Going outside now would only draw suspicion. Better to stay inside and let the fire burn on its own. Tsuitsue came over and I took her thin, yellow hair in my rough hands, combing through it gently, strand by strand. Outside, it got louder. Earliu, you son of a dog, get out here. Uncle Changwe had burst out of his yard like a rabid dog, holding up that blue cloth bag, the one I'd left the frozen dog shit in. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair a mess, his broken teeth still bleeding every time he opened his mouth. He looked like a demon fresh from eating someone alive. He'd figured out a suspect. Earliu, the village thief. Apparently Earliu had been sneaking around Uncle's back wall last night, trying to steal a chicken. He didn't take anything, but he'd been there. That was enough for Uncle Changwe. The whole village came out to watch. Entertainment was scarce in those days. Any commotion brought every ear in the neighborhood. Earliu was squatting by his wall picking lice off himself when Uncle charged at him. The second Earliu saw him coming, guilt flashed across his face, and he tried to run. That was all the proof Uncle needed. Uncle tackled him into the snow. 2 grown men rolling around, punching, scratching, choking. Give me back my grain. Give it back. Uncle was on top, hands around Earliu's throat, his broken teeth grinding. Earliu wasn't weak either. He clawed Uncle's face and ripped off 2 strips of skin. The blue bag fell open in the snow. A few chunks of frozen dog shit rolled out. The villagers stared. What's that? Doesn't look like grain. Is that shit? I sat inside, hands steady, braiding Tsuitsue's hair. Left strand over, right strand over, nice and even. Brother, it sounds like there's a fight outside, Tsuitsue whispered, scrunching her shoulders. Dogs biting dogs. Nothing but fur and teeth. I finished the braid and looked at her. That little plait gave her pale face a bit of life. Sister looks pretty, Yaya clapped from the bed. By then the village militia had pulled the 2 men apart. Earliu lay on the ground, face swollen and bruised. Uncle Changwe was worse, scratches bleeding all over his face, sitting in the snow next to those chunks of dog shit, crying his eyes out. My millet turned into shit. That's what you get. Earliu spat blood on the ground. You've been so greedy your whole life. Even heaven couldn't stand it anymore. Turned your grain into shit as punishment. The villagers whispered among themselves. Some said it was fox spirits. Some said heaven was punishing Uncle for being so stingy. Nobody suspected me. Why would they? I was just a starving 19-year-old orphan who never talked back to anyone. And I'd been inside the whole time with my sisters, doors shut, hadn't stepped out once. But I knew this wasn't over. Uncle lost his grain, so this winter just got harder for him. He'd come looking for trouble again. And Earliu would hold a grudge from that beating. Let them tear each other apart. I adjusted the hatchet on my belt, making sure I could draw it fast. Suitsue, bolt the door. I made my voice serious. Remember what I said. No matter who comes, even if God himself knocks. If it's not me, don't open. If someone tries to break in, throw boiling water on them. I'll remember, brother. Tite nodded hard, touching her new braid. There was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. A little bit of steel. I pushed open the door. Cold wind hit my face. I didn't look at Uncle Changue, who was still wailing in the snow. I pulled my hat low, stepped into the deep snow, and headed toward the mountains behind the village. I wasn't coming back without meat. Once I left the village, the noise disappeared behind me. The world was nothing but white, blinding, endless white. I waded through snow up to my knees. Every step was a fight. 3 days of heavy snow had sealed the mountain, and nobody wanted to come out here. Good. No people meant no competition. The little woods behind the village were usually picked clean by villagers looking for firewood. You couldn't even find a rabbit hare. But after 3 days of snow, hungry animals would come to the edges looking for food. I walked about a mile in. Bare poplar and locust trees all around, branches covered in ice. The cold crept up through my pants. The porridge warmth was long gone. My body was too weak. I was sweating and panting after just this short walk. I had to be fast. Back home, there was no oil, no real nutrition. The firewood wouldn't last the night. I closed my eyes and opened them again. X-ray vision on. The snow turned to glass. I could see through it layer by layer, fresh powder on top, packed ice underneath, then dead leaves and frozen dirt. My vision swept out 50 meters in every direction like radar. Nothing, just rotten roots and rocks. The villagers had stripped this area bare. I shut it off to save energy. Using the vision too long made my brain ache, and pushed deeper. The trees got thicker, the snow deeper. Then I stopped. Near some bushes, a line of fresh paw prints in the snow. Small, spaced far apart. A rabbit, and it had passed less than half an hour ago. The tracks disappeared at a fallen dead tree. I smiled. Vision on again. I looked through the tree trunk, through the piled-up leaves. A narrow tunnel appeared, a rabbit escape route, running just under the snow. I followed the tunnel with my eyes. 5 meters, 10 meters. About 20 meters away, under a thorny rose bush, there was a cozy little nest lined with dry grass. 3 rabbits. 3 fat, gray-brown rabbits huddled together for warmth. The biggest one was round as a ball, ears twitching. My throat tightened. Meat. Real, living meat. Skinned and braised, that would be. I could feel the drool building in my mouth. But how to catch them? I only had a hatchet. Rabbits are skittish. One sound, and they'd bolt through their tunnels faster than I could blink. Digging them out would take too long. Setting a trap meant no guarantee they'd come back. I couldn't force it. Had to be smart. I picked up 2 fist-sized stones from the snow. Heavy and cold. I used to be the best slingshot kid in the village. My hands still remembered. No gun. Stones would be my bullets. I circled around to the downwind side of the bush so my scent wouldn't carry. Then I crept in. 20 meters. 15. 10. 10 was the limit. Any closer, and they'd hear my footsteps in the snow. I dropped to one knee. Took a deep breath of ice-cold air. My body was a bowstring pulled tight. Vision on. This time I didn't scan. I locked onto the fattest rabbit. Through the snow, through the tangled branches, I could see every breath it took, every tiny muscle twitch. I could see the thinnest part of its skull. The temple. Hit that, and it's instant death. I raised my right arm slowly. Muscles tight, veins popping. I calculated the arc, how the stone would weave through the bush, where the rabbit's head would be the moment it sensed danger. The whole world went silent. Wind stopped. Snow stopped falling. All I could see was that rabbit's skull and the kill spot glowing red in my mind. Now, my arm whipped forward. The stone flew in a slight curve, threading past the thickest branches of the bush. That was the terrifying power of X-ray vision. I could correct my aim in real time. The big rabbit's ears shot up. It started to raise its head. Too late. A wet thud. Stone hit flesh. Bone cracked. The sound was sharp in the silent snow. Direct hit behind the ear. The rabbit's head snapped sideways. Its legs kicked once, and it went limp. Got it. I didn't stop. My left hand fired the second stone at the mother rabbit bolting for the tunnel entrance. 2 throws back to back. My aim was off by a hair. The stone smashed into her back leg. She screamed, tumbled through the snow, but survival instinct drove her to drag herself toward the tunnel with her broken leg. Not a chance I was letting meat escape. I exploded forward like a hunting cat. Hatchet flipped into my hand. A few steps, and I was at the bush. She was halfway into the hole. One swing. A flash of cold steel. Her head rolled off. Blood sprayed across the white snow, steaming in the cold air. The third rabbit, the smallest one, was already gone down a side tunnel. I let it go. 2 out of 3. More than enough. I stood there gasping, holding the headless mother rabbit by the legs. Blood dripped from the neck, and the smell wasn't bad at all. To me, it smelled wonderful. I pulled the big male out of the nest. Heavy, 7 or 8 pounds at least, fat as a piglet. This family had eaten every scrap of bark and root nearby to get this plump. 2 rabbits. Over 10 pounds of meat between them. My hands were shaking, and not from the cold. From pure excitement. With this meat, my sister's cheeks would fill out. We could have a real new year. My head was pounding from using the vision so hard. Everything kept going dark around the edges. I squatted down and shoved a handful of clean snow in my mouth. The cold shock helped clear my head a little. Then I heard it, a rustling in the dead grass nearby. Soft, but unmistakable. Something else was here. I snapped up the hatchet and held it across my chest. I didn't dare use the vision again, afraid I'd pass out. I just squinted hard at the grass. It moved. Then a colorful head poked out carefully. A wild pheasant. A gorgeous one, feathers like a rainbow. These birds are even smarter than rabbits. It had stayed perfectly still through the whole fight, and now it thought the danger had passed. Its round little eyes met mine. We stared at each other, 5 meters apart. I held my breath. The pheasant froze too, neck feathers puffing up in fear. Then it bolted, wings flapping, spraying snow everywhere, shooting straight up into the air. That's how pheasants take off, straight up first, then they glide. And that moment going up is their only weakness. No stones left. Hatchet too heavy to throw accurately. I yanked out my slingshot and dug a pellet from my pocket. When I was a kid, nobody in the village could outshoot me. The pellet flew, hit the bird square. But pheasants are tough. If you don't get the head, they don't die. It dropped a few feathers and flapped forward, limping, losing speed. That was my chance. I threw myself at it like a net, my whole body crashing into the snow on top of the bird. It screamed, wings beating wild, talons scratching a bloody line across my face. Burned like fire, but my hands were around its neck. Get down here. I roared and twisted. Snap. It went still. I climbed out of the snow covered head to toe, a scratch bleeding on my face, grinning like a fool. I held up that beautiful bird with its long tail feathers dragging on the ground. Hit the jackpot. 2 rabbits and a wild pheasant. Veteran hunters go deep into the mountains for hauls like this. I got it all in a little grove in under 10 minutes. X-ray vision plus raw guts, the ultimate hunting combination. I pulled all 3 kills into my space. Then I kicked fresh snow over the bloodstains, flipped the red patches under, and swept my footprints with a branch to make it look like animals had been fighting. I gathered some firewood and strapped it to my back. That way, walking into the village, I was just a kid who went out to collect wood. Nothing suspicious. I straightened up. The sun was high now. Time to go home. My sisters were waiting. I couldn't wait to see their faces when they saw the meat. I snuck back home and locked everything tight. Gate, door, even stuffed the window cracks with rags. Couldn't let a single smell escape. Tsue stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Brother, what are you doing? I didn't answer. I just grinned and reached into my space with a thought. Thud. A big, colorful pheasant and 2 fat rabbits appeared on the bed out of thin air. Tsue's eyes went wide as plates. Her mouth dropped open and stayed there. Yaya crawled over, reaching her little hand out to touch the animals, but too scared to actually do it. She looked back at me, shy and hopeful. "Brother, is that meat?" Suetsue's voice was shaking. Tears just started falling on their own. In these times, people couldn't even get soup with a speck of oil in it. A whole bed full of meat was more precious than a dream. What's there to cry about? This is a good thing. Now hurry up, get the fire going. The room came alive. Suetsue jumped off the bed and started gathering firewood. Yaya toddled around on her short legs, carrying the matchbox, face flushed red with excitement. I took the pheasant to the cooking pit with my knife. Killing a chicken indoors takes skill, can't get blood everywhere, and definitely can't let the smell leak out. I dug a deep hole next to the pit, chopped the head off, drained the blood into the hole. Gutted it quick. My hands moved like I'd been a butcher for decades. All the guts went in the hole. Strong smell, too risky to keep. "Brother, the intestines." Tetsue looked sad. "That was still meat." "Throw it away," I said without looking up. "We eat the good stuff. We don't need scraps." I buried the guts, packed the dirt down tight, and stomped on it a few times. Not one whiff of blood getting out. Now the question was how to cook it. Stew? No, the smell would travel 3 miles. Braised? Even worse. The cooking smoke would bring every starving person in the village to our door. Then I looked at the yellow clay on the floor. "Suetsue, bring some water and mix this dirt into mud." She looked confused but did what I said. I didn't pluck the feathers. This was beggar's chicken. You wrap the whole bird in mud, feathers and all. When the clay bakes hard, you crack it open and the feathers peel right off with the shell. Locks all the flavor inside. Soon that beautiful pheasant was an ugly ball of yellow mud. The fire was roaring. I shoved the mud ball deep into the coals and buried it under glowing charcoal. Just let it cook. I sat back on the bed. This method seals the smell inside the clay shell. Nothing leaks until you crack it open. That moment would belong to us alone. Time crawled by. The fire crackled against the mud ball. The shell dried to gray-white, thin cracks spreading across it. No meat smell in the air, but the room was getting warmer. Yaya lay on the edge of the bed, big eyes glued to the fire pit, drool running down her chin, and she didn't even notice. "Brother, is it done yet?" She asked that about 10 times. When the sun started dipping west, I figured it was ready. I pulled the mud ball out of the coals with the fire tongs. Even before cracking it, a fierce roasted smell leaked through the tiny cracks. Just a hint of it, and my stomach went wild. I flipped the hatchet around and tapped the baked clay with the back of the blade. Crack! The shell split open, and the smell that had been trapped inside exploded out like a volcano. Wild pheasant fat, roasted golden, rich and overwhelming. It hit you right between the eyes. Wow! Suetsue and Yaya gasped at the same time. I peeled the shell away. The feathers came right off with it, clean as anything. Underneath, steaming chicken meat, glistening with golden oil, little bubbles of fat sizzling along the grain. The smell was so thick it could knock you over. My mouth was watering so hard my jaw ached. I reached in barehanded and ripped off a drumstick. Hot. Juice burst out the moment the leg came free, dripping into the pan, filling the room with even more aroma. I shoved the biggest drumstick into Yaya's hands. She held it with both hands. It was bigger than her face. She kept switching it between hands because it burned, but wouldn't let go. She opened her little mouth and bit right into the fattest part. Her eyes went perfectly round. The flavor hit her so hard she froze. Oil ran down her chin, dripped onto her cotton coat. She panicked and scooped it up with her finger, sucking it clean with a loud smack. I tore off the other drumstick and held it out to Tsuetsue. "Brother, I don't need it. I'll just have a wing. Eat what I give you." I shoved it in her mouth. "This little bit of meat is nothing. Someday I'll feed you so much you'll be sick of it." Tsuetsue bit into the drumstick with tears and oil both running down her face. 9 years old, and this was the first time in her life she knew what meat really tasted like. I grabbed the bony carcass for myself and gnawed it down. Not much meat, but the bones were so tender they crumbled in my mouth. The marrow mixed with fat tasted better than the meat itself. The room was nothing but the sound of eating. A 3-pound pheasant, gone in under 10 minutes. Yaya picked up every crumb off the table with wet fingertips. I scraped the chicken oil off the inside of the clay shell into a pot, added some millet and water, and cooked it for about 10 minutes. Thin porridge, but with real fat floating on top. One warm mouthful, and it slid down smooth as silk. When we finished, all three of us leaned against the wall, stuffed so full we could barely see straight. Yaya's belly stuck out like a little ball. The sickly color was finally fading from her face. I grabbed a rag and wiped my mouth clean. Then I pulled both sisters close and scrubbed every trace of oil off their faces, hard enough to turn the skin red. Listen up, my expression went dead serious. The warmth from dinner was gone from my face. What did we eat today? I stared into Yaya's eyes. She burped. Chicken. Wrong. My voice dropped low. Wild vegetable paste. Bitter, awful wild vegetable paste. Yaya flinched, eyes going red. I softened my tone, but kept my eyes firm. Yaya, remember this. The people out there are wolves. If they find out we ate meat, they'll break in, rip the food right out of us, and throw us into the snow to freeze. You understand? Her face went white. She clamped both hands over her mouth. I won't tell. I die first. I only ate vegetable paste. Sue was older and caught on fast. She nodded hard. Brother, I know. If anyone asks, I'll say we ran out of food and we've been drinking water we rinsed the pot with. Good. That's exactly right. In a time when everyone's eyes are green with hunger, eating alone is the biggest crime. If you want to live long, you learn to play weak. You hide your teeth, and you hide your meat. Burn those bones to ash in the fire pit, I told them. No evidence goes outside. Right then, I heard footsteps outside the yard wall. Light. Careful. Someone tiptoeing. My ears were sharper than before. The footsteps stopped right outside, near the chimney, exactly where the cooking pit was. Someone had caught a trace of the smell. The beggar's chicken had locked in most of it, but that one moment when I cracked the shell, a wisp must have drifted out through a gap. A normal person wouldn't notice. But someone who'd been starving for days, with a nose sharper than a dog's, that tiny whiff of oil was a lighthouse in the dark. I put a finger to my lips and looked at my sisters. My eyes went cold. I didn't grab the knife. I picked up a broken brick with a sharp edge from the side of the bed. Then I cracked the door open, just a hand's width. Dark inside, bright outside. Earliu was out there, hanging off the top of the wall, peering in with his thief eyes darting around. His face was still swollen from the beating Uncle Changwe gave him this morning. He'd been lying at home, hurting all over, but hunger burned hotter than pain. Then he caught a smell, something rich, something like meat and oil, coming from my yard. He didn't believe it. I was poorer than him. Where would I get meat? But he came anyway. From the crack in the door, I stared straight at him. Not like you look at a neighbor. Like you look at a dead rat on a wall. No anger. No panic. Just cold. I stood in the shadow behind the door, tossing that brick up and catching it. Up. Down. The little slap of brick hitting palm echoed through the quiet winter afternoon. Earliu and I locked eyes for about 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, he remembered Uncle Changwe's broken teeth. He remembered the blood. His Adam's apple bobbed. The hunger in his eyes died, replaced by fear. I was checking if my chicken ran into your yard, he stammered, voice trembling. I didn't answer. I just let my mouth twitch, almost a smile, and squeezed the brick hard in my fist. That was enough. Oh God, his hands gave out. His feet slipped. He fell straight off the wall backward into a pile of rocks. Must have nearly cracked his tailbone. But he didn't dare scream. He scrambled up, grabbed his backside, and limped away as fast as he could, looking over his shoulder the whole way like I might chase him down and brain him with the brick. I watched until he disappeared around the corner. Then I closed the door and locked it. Is he gone? Sue whispered, clutching Yaya tight. Gone. I tossed the brick back in the corner and dusted off my hands. Remember this. People like him only understand one thing, fear. The more scared you are, the more they bully you. Be harder than them, and they wet themselves. Got it. Brother is the strongest. Early didn't go home after I scared him off the wall. He went straight to the village chief. I didn't know that yet. I was inside cleaning up, tossing the last chicken bone into my space, when I heard footsteps. Lots of them. 7 or 8 people at least, walking fast, heading right for us. Brother, someone's coming. Sue's face went white. Don't panic. All the food was safe in my space. Nothing to find. I poured cold water into the clay pot, threw in a handful of bitter dried wild greens, and set it over the last embers on the stove. Just warm enough to look like we'd been cooking. Remember what I taught you? I sat on the bed and started sharpening my hatchet on a stone. Nice and calm. The gate nearly shook apart from the pounding. Wang Yi, open up. The village chief is here. Erliu's voice was high and sharp, dripping with satisfaction. I took my time walking to the door. The moment it opened, Erliu pushed in first, nose twitching like a rat. See? I told you he wouldn't open. Guilty conscience. Where's the... He sniffed hard. Wait, where's the smell? There was a smell in the room, all right. Burnt wood smoke and the sour bitterness of overcooked wild greens. The meat scent was long gone. Chief Lu Changjin walked in behind him, eyes sharp as knives, scanning every corner. He saw what everyone would see. Bare walls, a mouse hole that couldn't even be patched, a bed mat so torn the straw showed through, and two little girls trembling under a ragged blanket, eyes wide with fear. On the table sat one clay pot. Erliu lunged for it, ripped the lid off, and dug around with a spoon. Black wilted leaves. Broth so thin you could see your reflection. Not a drop of oil. This can't be right. His eyes were wild. I smelled meat. I know I did. He hid it somewhere. He tore the room apart like a mad dog, flipped the bed mat, searched the cupboard, got on his hands and knees and sniffed the fire pit. Nothing. Just a pile of fresh ash that made him cough. I stood there with my hands tucked in my sleeves, watching him with zero expression. Uncle Erliu, I said, flat as plain water. If you're hungry, I'll split this pot of wild greens with you. But we really don't have meat. Unless you want to butcher me. I'm about 100 pounds. Go ahead. Soft words. Sharp edge. Chief Lu's face turned dark. But not at me. He looked at the watery greens. He looked at my two skeleton-thin sisters. Then he turned on Erliu. Enough, he roared. Erliu dropped the spoon. Zhang Erliu, this is what you call capitalist indulgence? The kid's drinking wildweed soup, and you come to turn his house upside down? Are you even human? Chief, I really did smell. Smell nothing. Lu kicked him in the backside. You're so hungry you're hallucinating. Harass Wang Yi again, and I'll dock your work points for the whole year. Get out. Erliu's face went purple. Every villager standing in the doorway was staring at him, whispering. He slunk out through the crowd with his tail between his legs. The chief sighed and looked at me, a little guilty. Kid, don't take it to heart. The whole village is struggling. When the relief grain comes in a few days, I'll try to get your family a few extra pounds. Thank you, Chief. I just nodded. Didn't say much. The crowd left. I shut the door and locked it. Suetsue was almost crying. Brother, I was so scared. It's fine. But through the crack in the door, I watched Erliu stumble away. My eyes went cold again. This wasn't over. And I was right. Erliu couldn't let it go. Back at his house, lying on his freezing bed with his stomach growling, he stewed in his rage. He was sure about that meat smell. He'd barely smelled meat a handful of times in his whole life. You don't forget that. He decided if he couldn't have any, I wouldn't have peace either. He thought about the thin paper on our windows, the dry firewood in our yard. Light the wood on fire, or punch through the window and throw cold water inside. That would freeze us to death easy enough. He'd done things like that before to other people. He wasn't done with me, but I wasn't done with him either. Late that night, the moon came out and lit the snow a dead white. I wasn't sleeping. I knew Erliu would come back. I carried my stool out into the yard and sat down in the snow with my mountain knife across my knees. I picked up the sharpening stone and started grinding the blade. Slow, steady strokes. The sound of steel on stone cut through the silence like a scream. I didn't have to look. My X-ray vision had already shown me Erliu creeping along the outside of my wall, a fire starter tucked in his coat and a half-brick in his hand. He was planning to burn my firewood or smash my windows, freeze us to death in our sleep. He pressed his eye to a crack in the wall to peek inside the yard. I let him watch. I tested the blade with my thumb. Sharp enough. Then I lifted my head and stared straight at the crack where his eye was hiding. Through the wall, I could see his face perfectly, but to him, it must have looked like I was staring through solid brick right into his soul. I held the knife up in the moonlight. Blade sharp, I said out loud, like I was talking to myself. Perfect for chopping off paws. Then I whipped my arm forward and let the knife fly. It buried itself in the wall with a thunk that echoed across the yard. The handle vibrated with a low hum. That blade sank deep into the packed earth, less than 6 inches from the tip of Erliu's nose on the other side. I heard a wet sound. He'd pissed himself. He fell backward, couldn't even stand up. Crawled through the snow on all fours for several meters before he got his legs under him and ran. He didn't go home that night. Spent the whole time shivering in a haystack at the edge of the village. I walked over and pulled the knife out of the wall. Looked down at his messy footprints in the snow and the yellow stain in the middle. Coward. But I knew scaring him wasn't enough. A man like Erliu forgets fear the way a dog forgets a beating. To get rid of him for good, I needed to put him somewhere he couldn't come back from. Somewhere with walls and guards and a few years' worth of hard labor. The next morning, I went for a walk around the village. Looked casual, hands behind my back, just a kid taking in the morning air. But my route took me right past Erliu's house. His yard was a wreck. Half the wall had collapsed. Looked even worse than mine. He never did any honest work, but somehow he always had a little something extra. The whole village knew he had sticky fingers, but nobody had ever caught him red-handed. I stood on the slope behind his house, looked down, and switched on my vision. Right through the roof, through the greasy blankets, through the whole rotten mess of his life. He wasn't home, still hiding in that haystack somewhere. I searched every inch of that house. Broken pots, dirty bowls, a jar of pickled vegetables stolen from a neighbor. Small stuff. Petty theft. Not enough for serious punishment. Then my eyes found the cooking pit. Under a pile of messy firewood, buried deep, there was a dusty burlap sack. I looked through it. Not grain. Coils of something black and heavy. Canvas rubber drive belts. The kind that ran the commune's tractor. My heart jumped. Just a couple days ago, the commune's tractor broke down. The driver was furious, cursing up a storm because the belt had gone missing. Nobody knew where it went. Now I did. People stole these belts to cut up and make shoe soles. Tough rubber and canvas, the best material around. But this wasn't just petty stealing. This was destroying collective farming equipment. Stealing commune property. In 1960, that was a serious crime. 3 to 5 years in a labor reform camp. Easy. Perfect. I went home, found a scrap of cigarette box paper and a piece of charcoal. I held the charcoal in my left hand and scratched out a few ugly words. Zhang Erliu has the tractor belt under his cooking pit. The writing was so bad my own father wouldn't recognize it as mine. I wrapped the note around a stone. At noon, when everyone was eating outside their doors, I walked past the house of Zhao Dao, the militia captain. He was in his yard chopping wood, a big man, all muscle, with a temper harder than his axe. I flicked my wrist over his wall. The stone landed right on the chopping block in front of him. "Who's there?" He grabbed his axe and ran to the gate. The alley was empty. I was already deep in the trees. He picked up the stone, unfolded the note, and his face changed instantly. The commune boss had been raging about that missing tractor belt, demanding it be found. "If this is real, I'll skin that bastard alive." Zhao grabbed 2 militiamen and their rifles and went straight to Erliu's house. Erliu had just crawled out of his haystack, half dead from hunger, stumbling home to find something to eat. He walked right into the trap. The militia was already inside. "Captain Zhao, what's this about?" His legs were shaking so bad he could barely stand. "Shut up. Search it." 2 militiamen went straight for the cooking pit, tossed aside the firewood, and dragged out the burlap sack. They shook it open. The shiny black drive belt rolled onto the ground, commune serial number still printed on the side. "Caught with the goods." "So it was you, you little bastard." Zhao slapped him so hard Erliu spun 3 times on the spot. "I'm innocent. I didn't steal it. I found it." "Found it? Go find one in the commune yard and show me. Take him away. You can wait for your public trial." They dragged him off. Erliu was crying, screaming, calling for his mother. I watched from behind a big tree in the distance as they hauled him away. 2 words came to mind. Felt great. Next morning, the village loudspeaker crackled to life. "All commune members, drop what you're doing and report to the threshing ground. Village struggle session. Nobody skips." Old Chief Lu's voice carried across the frozen fields, angry enough to scare the crows off the treetops. I was shoveling snow in the yard. I straightened up, stuck the shovel in a snowbank, and brushed myself off. told Suitsue to lock the door and stay inside, then headed out. The threshing ground was packed. Freezing wind cut through everyone, but nobody cared. In times like these, a public meeting was the closest thing to entertainment, especially when they'd caught a thief stealing from the commune. A rough stage had been set up in the center. Erliu was tied up tight with thick rope, a stolen black drive belt hanging around his neck like a sign of shame. He knelt there like a sick chicken, head hanging, face white, snot and tears frozen together on his cheeks. Militia Captain Zhao stood next to him, rifle in hand, face like thunder. Chief Lu stepped up with a tin megaphone, beard trembling with rage. "Look at this. Look at what our village produced. We're all starving through winter, and this man reaches his hand into the commune tractor. That belt keeps the machine running. Without it, how do we plow in spring?" The crowd erupted. Shameless. I knew he was no good. Turns out he's a repeat offender. Beat him to death. People like him are nothing but poison. Anger spread through the crowd like wildfire. In those days, stealing from the collective was 100 times worse than stealing from a neighbor. People picked up frozen dirt clods and rotten cabbage leaves and threw them at the stage. "Stop. Don't hit me. I was wrong." Erliu whimpered, curling up as small as he could. I stood at the very edge of the crowd, hands tucked in my sleeves, half my face hidden behind my collar. Just my eyes showing, calm, flat, like I was watching something that had nothing to do with me. I looked at Erliu the way you'd look at a pig waiting to be slaughtered. No pity, no gloating, just cold indifference. He must have felt my gaze. He raised his head and found me instantly in the crowd, the tall, skinny figure standing alone in the corner. I saw his whole body jolt. He remembered last night. The knife that flew past his nose. The eyes that made him piss himself. He knew. He knew it was me who turned him in. His mouth opened. He wanted to scream it out, point at me, drag me down with him. But he looked into my eyes and his throat locked shut. Not a single word came out. He didn't dare. Some animal instinct told him that if he pointed his finger at me now, whatever happened next, whether inside prison or out, would be worse. He understood something about me that most people in this village hadn't figured out yet. I don't bark. I bite. He dropped his head and gave up. By order of the commune, Chief Lu read the verdict. Zhang Erliu is guilty of stealing collective property and sabotaging production, a crime of serious nature. He is sentenced to 3 years of reform through labor at the county work farm. The crowd cheered. 2 militiamen grabbed Erliu like a dead dog and dragged him toward the freshly repaired tractor at the village gate. Villagers stepped aside as he passed, like he carried bad luck. I didn't move. When they dragged him right past me, his legs went soft. He squeezed his eyes shut and wouldn't look at me. I didn't blink, didn't even glance down. The tractor coughed to life and rumbled away. Erliu's crying faded into the wind and snow until there was nothing left. The crowd broke apart. A few women who loved gossip huddled together whispering, "Did you hear? Before he got caught, Erliu went to make trouble at Wang Ye's place. That's right. I heard he came back last night, so scared he wet himself. That orphan kid never says a word, but turns out he's a tough one." I felt the change around me. The way people looked at me was different now. Before, it was pity mixed with nothing, the kind of look you give someone you've already written off. Now there was something new in their eyes. Fear. A kid who could scare the village's most notorious troublemaker into wetting his pants, and then get that same man hauled off to a labor camp. That's not someone you mess with. Uncle Changwei was in the crowd too. He'd been planning to come after me about his missing grain. But watching me stand alone in the snow, he felt a chill crawl up his spine. He decided to leave me alone. For now, this was exactly what I wanted. In a world where people bully the weak and fear the strong, this reputation, "Don't touch him," was worth more than any explanation or any lock on my door. I turned and walked home through the snow. Nobody said hello. Nobody stepped in my way. Behind me, the threshing ground went quiet. Ahead of me was my broken-down little house. Still falling apart, still cold. But from today on, nobody would dare kick that door again. I walked around our 3 rooms and took a hard look. The walls were solid enough, but everything else was a joke. The window paper flapped in the wind like ghost flags. The door was so rotten you could kick it open with 1 foot. If I wanted my sisters to survive this winter, I had to fix this place up. Nobody dared come visit anymore, which made it the perfect time to work. I grabbed an axe and a saw and headed past the little grove, deeper toward the mountain edge. The village trees were too thin and weak. What I needed were dead red pines, hardwood, rot-resistant, already dry so I didn't have to wait for them to cure. A normal person would need a sled and a team of men to haul 100-pound logs back to the village. I didn't need any of that. I checked that nobody was around. Then I reached out with my mind. Take. A thick pine trunk, wide as a bowl, vanished from the snow and appeared inside my space. That was the biggest cheat of having this power. It was the world's best delivery service. I spent half an hour in the forest, collected 4 or 5 good logs and a pile of fat pine kindling, the resin-soaked kind that burns bright and hot. Then I walked home with empty hands. Nothing suspicious. Back inside the yard, gate locked, I told Suetsue to block the windows and not look outside. I waved my hand. Boom. The logs appeared in the yard, kicking up a cloud of snow dust. I stripped off my coat and got to work in just my patched shirt. Cold, but I heated up fast. First I ripped the old door off its hinges. Good for nothing but firewood now. Then I picked up the axe and saw and started cutting pine. My technique wasn't professional, but I was strong, and my X-ray vision helped me see the grain of the wood, where the knots were, where to cut for the least resistance. I could even carve precise joints without nails, lining everything up by looking through the wood. The vision turned me into a human precision machine. 2 hours later, I had a real door. 5 centimeters thick, solid red pine. Just looking at it made you feel safe. I added 2 heavy crossbars on the back for bolts, then carved a thick jujube wood bar for a latch. I grunted, heaved the 100-pound door up, and set it on the hinges. Perfect fit. Once this thing was shut and barred, my uncle could charge it like a bull and bounce right off. Even a wild boar would get a concussion trying. Next, the windows. I tore off every scrap of that useless paper. I didn't have glass, but I had a plan. I split leftover wood into strips and nailed a tight lattice of bars across the window frames. It blocked some light, but it stopped thieves cold. Behind the lattice, I layered 2 thick grass mats and stuffed every remaining gap with old rags. The room got darker, but that constant freezing draft that had been cutting through the house for years finally stopped. The temperature started climbing. I wiped the sweat off my forehead and looked around at what I'd built. This wasn't just a farmhouse anymore. It was a tiny fortress. "Brother, it's so warm," Tsutsue said, hugging Yahyao on the bed, face bright with surprise. "The wind doesn't blow on my head anymore." Yahyao rolled around on the bed laughing. "Brother, the door is so big. Uncle can never kick it open again." I ran my hand along the rough wood grain. "That's right. Nobody's kicking this door open ever again." A feeling I hadn't had in either of my lives settled over me. Safety. Real safety. These 3 rooms were our territory now. Our shelter. Doors shut, and the rest of the world could burn for all I cared. That night, after the girls fell asleep, I leaned against the wall and let my mind sink into my space. Time to count what I had. First, a big stack of chopped firewood. About a quarter of the space. Leftovers from the door, plus what I'd brought from the mountain. Enough for 10 to 15 days. In this winter, firewood was heat, and heat was life. Second, the blue cloth bag in the corner. About 4 pounds of millet left. That was our food safety net. Third, half a pheasant carcass from earlier, still with some meat on the bones. Fourth, the star of the collection, 2 frozen wild rabbits, hard as rocks. 7 or 8 pounds of meat between them, enough for several good meals. Fifth, 1 whole, uncooked pheasant, guts removed, feathers still on. I did the math in my head. Grain, 4 pounds of millet. Meat, 2 rabbits, 1 whole pheasant, half a leftover pheasant. Fuel, 2 weeks of firewood. Money, a few pennies. Pockets cleaner than my face. Sounds decent? No, not even close. This was the winter of 1960, the worst of the Great Famine. This food would last maybe half a month. Then what? And food wasn't the only problem. We had no cooking oil, no salt, no cotton. Suetsue and Yaya's coats were 2 years old. The cotton inside had hardened into useless lumps. The house was warm now, but step outside and they'd freeze through. Yaya's shoes had holes in the toes. Looking further ahead, After New Year came spring planting, grain taxes, government fees. Without money and ration tickets, we couldn't survive. Still too poor, I thought. The excitement of having a full space faded against the weight of everything we still needed. I looked at the empty floor of my space. I had to fill it, all 10 cubic meters of it. Only when this space was packed to the ceiling with supplies would I have the confidence to walk tall in this world. My eyes landed on the rabbit pelts and the pheasant's colorful tail feathers. In the village, this stuff was worth nothing, maybe a couple of corn buns. But in the city, that was a different story. City people had money and ration tickets, but couldn't buy meat anywhere. On the black market, meat prices had gone through the roof. I needed to make a trip to the county town. Not just for oil and salt, I needed to scout the place. I had X-ray vision and a storage space. Using them just to catch rabbits was a criminal waste of talent. The county junk shop, were there treasures people had overlooked? The black market, could I make some real deals? And maybe, could I get my hands on a proper weapon? I touched the hatchet on my belt. Fine for chopping wood, but if I ran into a real wild animal in the mountains, it was too short, too risky. I needed a gun, even a homemade one. I opened my eyes in the dark. They must have been glowing. But to do big business in town, I needed something better to sell than rabbit skin and chicken feathers. I needed real goods, valuable goods. That meant one more trip into the mountains. Deeper this time. I rolled over, pulled the blanket up over Yaya's little bare shoulder, and closed my eyes. Sleep. Build up my strength. Tomorrow I'd head back into the mountains and see what luck had waiting for me. Before dawn, I slipped out while my sisters were still sleeping. Hatchet on my belt, coat tied tight, out into the frozen morning. The air was so cold it felt like breathing ice. I headed to the same spot where I'd caught the rabbits yesterday. The blood smell was gone, covered by fresh snow. I crouched down and turned on my vision, scanning the ground out of habit. Everything looked normal, until I spotted something at the edge of the grove. Under a thin layer of blown snow, there were deep holes punched into the frozen earth. Not rabbit prints, not bird tracks. These were bowl-sized, split-hoof craters that had smashed right through the snow into the hard ground beneath. My heart clenched. Wild boar. A big one leading a group of smaller ones. I followed the tracks with my vision. They'd come from deep in the mountains, circled through the trees gnawing bark and roots, then headed back. The main prints were deep enough to belong to something over 200 pounds. A walking mountain of meat. In a famine, one wild boar meant hundreds of pounds of food, enough to feed the whole village for a month, enough to trade for serious money and ration tickets. My hand went to the hatchet. Then I let go. No, not yet. All I had was this little blade. Wild boar have hides like armor, caked mud and pine resin over thick skin. A regular shotgun might not even punch through. And this was a whole group. If I spooked them and got charged by a few 100-pound pigs, no amount of X-ray vision would save me from being trampled into paste. I had to be patient. I covered the tracks carefully with fresh snow so no other hunter would find them. These were my boars. My New Year's feast. Reserved. Wait until I get back from town, I muttered, staring at the trail leading into the deep mountains. Wait until I get a real weapon. Then we settle up. I burned that location into my brain and walked home. Back inside, the house was still cold. Tetsue was crouched by the fire pit, trying to start a flame, coughing, her face blue from the chill. Yaya refused to leave the blankets, just two big eyes peeking out. Then I noticed something that stopped me cold. Tse bent over to add wood, and the back of her cotton coat ripped open with a sharp tear. What spilled out wasn't cotton. It was gray, flimsy, mixed with bits of straw. Reed fluff, the worthless stuff that grows by the river. Looks puffy but blocks nothing. Wind goes straight through it. Our uncle's wife had, generously, altered these coats for my sisters after our parents died, claiming she'd added fresh cotton. It was all fake. All lies. No wonder Tsue shivered every single day. Something sharp stabbed my chest. My nose burned. It's fine, brother. I'm not cold, Tsue said quickly, trying to cover the rip. The fabric's just old. I'll sew it up, so nothing, I said, my voice rough. A dog wouldn't wear this garbage. I checked the salt jar. Empty. Scraped clean when I cooked the pheasant yesterday. Not even a white crust left on the bottom. You can go days without meat, but not without salt. No salt means no strength. Can't walk, can't work. The broken coat, the empty jar, my sister's trusting eyes. The excitement from finding those boar tracks died under the weight of reality. Boars running in the mountains were just a dream on paper. The poverty right in front of me, that was the real knife, cutting deeper every day. No more waiting. I slammed my fist on the bed frame. I'm going to town today. I'd planned to collect more pelts first, but my sisters were freezing and we had no salt. Every day I delayed was a day they suffered. I pulled Tsue up from the fire, locked the door behind me. I left food in the cabinet. I took out one rabbit pelt, the wild pheasant, and poured out about 2 or 3 pounds of millet into a cloth bag. In these times, grain worked better than money. On the black market, millet was hard currency. Brother, you're going to the county. Tsue looked worried. They say there are wolves on the road and bandits. I'll be fine. Your brother's hard to kill. I packed everything into a patched burlap sack, tucked the hatchet behind my back under my coat, and knelt down in front of Tsue, hands on her shoulders. Dead serious. After I leave, bar the door. Wedge the log behind it. Unless you hear my voice, don't open for anyone. Not the village chief, not God himself. If someone tries to break in, throw boiling water. Use the knife. Understand? She nodded so hard her braids bounced. I understand. I won't open. I looked at Yaya, still buried in blankets. Be good, Yaya. Stay in bed. When brother comes back, I'll bring big white steamed buns and new clothes. I want candy. A tiny hand shot out from the covers. I'll buy the biggest piece they have. I ruffled her hair, stood up, and didn't look back. Pulled everything into my space, pushed open the door, and walked out into the wind. I heard the bolt drop behind me. Good. I pulled my hat low over my eyes. County town. Black market. Here I come. The village was 30 miles from town. On flat ground, that's a 2 or 3 hour walk. But this was the frozen northeast, deep winter, mountain roads buried under snow. There was no road, just endless white. In the deep spots, snow reached my thighs. Even in the shallow parts, it covered my ankles. Every step was a battle. Plant my foot, pull my leg free, do it again. The wind lashed my face like a whip. But I couldn't stop. Out here between nowhere and nowhere, if I rested and my sweat cooled, I'd freeze solid on the spot. About 10 miles in, I hit a stretch of rocky ground, rough terrain where wild animals like to lurk. I slowed down and switched to what I called radar mode. Walk a few hundred meters, flash on the vision, scan the area, switch it off, keep moving. Couldn't burn through my mental energy all at once. One caught something. Behind a big weathered boulder, 2 faint green glowing spots. I focused. A lone wolf. Skinny as a skeleton, gray fur matted and filthy, curled up in a crack between rocks, watching the path. One back leg was injured, hanging limp. This was the most dangerous kind, cast out from the pack or crippled and alone. Starving wolves like this would attack humans without hesitation. It was set up right beside the trail. Any normal person walking by would get ambushed. One bite, and you'd be lucky to survive. I gripped the hatchet inside my sleeve. But I didn't charge in. The wolf was too skinny, the fur too ragged, not worth risking a fight over. And spilling blood out here might attract other predators. Better to avoid trouble. I used my vision to lock the wolf's position and picked a route that stayed just outside its attack range, downwind, so it couldn't smell me. The wolf's ears perked up. Its nose twitched. But with no scent and nothing visible, it hesitated and stayed put. I slipped past without a sound. Didn't relax until I was 2 miles clear and confirmed it hadn't followed. That was the real travel superpower of X-ray vision, danger avoidance. Another half hour of trudging. The sun climbed high, glaring off the snow until my eyes ached. My stomach started growling. I'd left in such a rush I hadn't eaten. I was looking for a sheltered spot to chew some dried food when 2 gray-brown shapes on a snow slope ahead made me freeze. Roe deer, the legendary dumb animal of the Northeast. One big, one small, standing on the slope, pawing through snow to find grass roots. They were less than 50 meters from the trail. When they saw me stop, they didn't run. They raised their heads, ears straight up, big round eyes staring at me with pure curiosity. The white fur on their rumps puffed out like 2 flowers. I almost laughed. This really was the old saying come to life. Club a roe deer, scoop up fish, free meat, walking right up to me. Roe deer are so curious that if you don't make too much noise, they'll stand there watching you forever. Shoot and miss, they'll run off, then come back to check what made the bang. But I had no gun, and I couldn't pull living things into my space. That was an absolute rule. Tried it once with a bug and felt like my brain was going to melt. They had to be dead first. I set down my sack slowly. Instead of drawing the hatchet, I bent down and pried 2 fist-sized chunks of frozen dirt from the ground. Out here there weren't many rocks, but frozen earth was hard as iron. Hit a skull with one of these, and the effect was the same. I checked the terrain with my vision. Both deer were standing in a deep snow pocket, drifts up past their bellies. That meant they'd be slow to start running, legs trapped in heavy snow. That was my window. I took a deep breath and started moving toward them. Not straight. I walked in a zigzag, acting casual, like I was just passing through. Didn't look directly at them, but kept the big one locked in my peripheral vision. 50 meters. 40. 30. The big one got nervous. Let out a bark and started to turn. Now, my legs exploded forward, stamping a deep hole in the snow as I launched myself. The frozen dirt block left my hand. 30 meters. Under the X-ray guided aim, the chunk flew in a dead straight line. It hit the big deer square on the side of the head. No sound, no cry. It dropped like a felled tree, legs twitching in the snow. The small one panicked and bolted, but the snow was too deep. It stumbled, hooves punching through the crust, stuck. I was already on top of it. Hatchet out, sprinting like a hunting cat. Before the little deer could pull free and build speed, I swung. The flat of the blade cracked against the back of its skull. It crumpled. Clean. Fast. One dead, one knocked out. I finished the big one with a quick cut to bleed it, then touched both warm bodies. Take. Both deer vanished into my space. I dusted off my hands and grinned so wide it hurt. This luck was unreal. I hadn't even reached town yet, and my fortune had already doubled. 2 roe deer, 50 or 60 pounds of meat between them. Roe deer meat is tender and fine-grained, and the hides make excellent bedding material. I looked toward the distant hills. The outline of the county town was just barely visible now. Chimneys trailing black smoke, the faint suggestion of crowds and buildings. That's where the supplies were. The salt, the cotton, the things my sisters needed. And maybe more. I touched the hatchet on my belt and felt my eyes sharpen. Would the people in town be harder to deal with than wild animals? The county town came into view around mid-morning. It looked as miserable as the village. Gray walls covered in red paint slogans, people shuffling around with hollow faces, a long line outside the supply store for ration matches and kerosene. I didn't go near the crowds. I ducked into an empty alley, wound through a maze of turns, and stopped behind an abandoned outhouse. Garbage and frozen filth everywhere. Nobody around. Time to prepare. I closed my eyes and sank into my space. I wasn't going to sell whole deer, too flashy. Using my mind to control the hatchet inside the space, I butchered the roe deer right there. Cut off the heads, hooves, stripped the hides. Clumsy work, but the mental control made it passable. I kept only the best cuts, leg meat and tenderloin, about 20 pounds total. Left the bones and guts for later. Next I had to change my look. In the corner of my space was my father's old sheepskin coat. Filthy, stinking, falling apart. I'd never thrown it away. Today it was perfect. I swapped my cotton coat for it, pulled on a ratty dog fur hat with the ear flaps down to hide half my face. Still not enough. I grabbed a handful of ash and dirt from the ground and smeared it all over my face and hands. My clean skin turned waxy yellow and black, like I'd crawled out of a coal pit. I stuffed rags under the back of the coat to make a hump. When I straightened up, the young hunter was gone. In his place stood a bent-over, coughing, filthy old man who shuffled when he walked. I tested the voice, low, raspy, dry. Even Tsue wouldn't recognize me. I made my way to the west side of town, to an abandoned brick factory left over from the Japanese occupation. Crumbling walls, dead weeds tall as a man, and a maze of exits in every direction. This was the county's biggest underground market, the Ghost Market. A few rough-looking men squatted by the outer wall, smoking, watching everyone who passed. Lookouts. I shuffled past them without glancing sideways. They gave me one look. Just another dirty old refugee hoping to trade something for survival food. The most common sight in the ghost market. One of them blew a smoke ring and ignored me. I was in. Inside, it was dark and eerily quiet. Nothing like a normal market. Dozens of little stalls hid behind broken brick piles and half-collapsed walls. Every seller had their face covered or their hat pulled low. No shouting. Buyers and sellers used hand signals or whispered in each other's ears. If trouble came, every person here could vanish through the cracks in under a minute. I found a sheltered corner out of the wind, pulled my burlap sack from the space, and set it on the ground. I didn't open it, just tucked my hands in my sleeves, squinted like a tired old farmer sunning himself, and watched the crowd with the corners of my eyes. I was waiting for the right buyer. People walked past and didn't even slow down. Everyone assumed the dirty sack held rotten sweet potatoes or dried weeds. That's what most people sold here. Then a middle-aged man in a neat mouse suit and glasses stopped in front of me. His clothes were plain, but his leather shoes were polished to a shine. Clearly someone from a government office or a factory. He carried an empty mesh shopping bag, and his eyes were desperate, like a man searching for medicine. "Old brother, got any fine grain?" he asked quietly, not expecting much. I didn't speak. I just slowly reached out one dirt-black hand and loosened the sack's opening a crack. He glanced in casually. Then his eyes nearly popped out of his head. His breathing went sharp and fast. He saw gray fur, wild rabbit, and beneath it, red and white blocks of meat, roe deer. In a snowbound county where even the mice were starving, a sack of wild meat was like a bomb going off. These. He was so excited he could barely form words. His hand reached toward the sack. I slapped the opening shut and looked up at him with cold, gravelly voice. "Buying? Yes, I'm buying." He was rubbing his hands together, glancing left and right, terrified someone else would notice. "Old brother, how much? How much do you have?" "I'll take everything." His whisper was too loud. A few nearby heads turned. "Take everything?" I let out a dry laugh. "Can you handle it all?" I opened the sack a little wider. This time, several passers-by caught a glimpse. "Holy, that's meat." Someone couldn't hold it in. That one shout was like water hitting hot oil. The dead corner exploded to life. 7 or 8 people swarmed in, eyes glowing green. The animal instinct of starving people who've just spotted food. "Old man, I want that rabbit." "Back off. I was here first. I'll buy the whole lot. I've got grain rations. National ones. 1 second ago, nobody cared about this filthy wall corner. Now it was the center of the entire black market. I didn't flinch. I sat down right on top of the sack, blocking every hand that reached for it. "No grabbing," I said slowly. "Anyone who grabs, I don't sell to." The crowd went silent instantly, but their eyes stayed locked on the sack like hooks. The man with glasses pushed forward. "Old brother, name your price." "I have money. I have ration tickets." I held up 2 fingers. 2 yuan per pound. In normal times, that was robbery. Pork cost 70 or 80 cents a pound. But on the black market, with meat this scarce, 2 yuan was a bargain. Everyone knew it. Before anyone could relax, I added one more condition. No grain tickets. Cash only. And industrial coupons. I didn't need grain tickets. I had millet in my space, and grain tickets were restricted by region anyway. What I needed were industrial coupons. You couldn't buy a pod, a bolt of cloth, shoes, a lock, or eventually a bicycle or sewing machine without them. Only city factory workers got these coupons. Farm people like me never saw one. Industrial coupons, a few faces fell. Those were precious. "I have them." The man with glasses dug into his pocket and pulled out a stack. "I work at the steel factory. Give me 5 pounds of roe deer and 1 rabbit." He counted out 10 yuan and painfully peeled off several colorful coupons. I scanned them with my vision. Real bills, clear watermarks. "Deal." I pulled out my hatchet. Just looked like a beat-up old knife to everyone else, and sliced off a chunk of deer meat. Grabbed a rabbit. Didn't weigh anything, just went by feel. About 5.5 pounds there. Extras on the house. He bounced it in his hand, grinning ear to ear. He stuffed the meat into his bag, covered it with his coat, and scurried off like a thief. After the first sale, The rest of them went crazy. I've got 3 industrial coupons. Give me 2 pounds. I have cash. No coupons. 3 yuan a pound. Deal? I sat on that sack like a king on his throne. Took money, took coupons, cut meat. Hands steady, eyes calm. Watching that stack of bills grow thicker and thicker, feeling those colorful industrial coupons pile up in my hand. That rush was better than killing a pig. This was monopoly. This was a seller's market. In an age where everything was scarce, whoever held the goods held all the power. Less than 30 minutes. The sack was empty. Even the pheasant sold. An old grandmother bought it with 2 cloth tickets and 5 yuan, said she wanted to make soup for her grandson. I stood up and dusted off my backside. Total take, over 130 yuan. About a dozen industrial coupons, plus a few rare cloth tickets and sugar tickets. 130 yuan. In a time when a strong worker earned a few cents in work points per day, this was a fortune. Enough for my family to live comfortably for years. People who missed out crowded around asking if I had more. Nothing left, I said, tucking the empty sack under my arm, still hunched over, coughing. That was everything my family had. Just trying to scrape together medicine money. I shuffled through the crowd and headed for the exit. But I could feel it. A few sets of eyes following me that had nothing to do with disappointment over missing out on meat. Those were greedy eyes. Wolf eyes locked on a fat sheep. I pulled my hat lower and let a cold smile flicker across my mouth. Of course, money attracts predators. But I'd come prepared for this. Outside the brick factory, I kept my disguise on. Still the bent old man, shuffling along. I had shopping to do. I went to the supply co-op. Too many people to buy much, so I kept it small. Used my new tickets to buy 2 pounds of coarse salt, a bolt of blue and white cotton fabric, and a big iron padlock I'd been dreaming about. I stuffed everything inside my coat and ducked into a side alley. I'd felt them since leaving the ghost market. 2 tails, hanging back, but never letting go. 2 men in gray coats with red armbands on their sleeves. But those armbands were crooked, no official stamps on them. And these 2 walked like street thugs, not patrol officers. They were exactly what I thought. Robbers who camped outside the black market, watched for anyone who made money, and followed them to shake them down. Or just took everything by force. A lone old man carrying a fortune? To them, I was a slab of meat on a cutting board. I let them follow. I picked the narrowest, most deserted alleys I could find. Twisted and turned deeper into an abandoned demolition zone. Crumbling walls, piled snow, not even stray dogs around. I walked into a dead-end alley, barely 2 meters wide. A collapsed wall blocked the far end. Nowhere to go. I stopped. Running? Why'd you stop running? Mocking laughter from behind. The 2 men strolled up and plugged the alley entrance. The tall one had a knife scar across his face and was flipping a folding blade, steel catching the cold light. The short fat one carried a wooden club wrapped in sheet metal. Hey Grandpa, lend us some cash? Scarface grinned, stepping closer. Saw your big show at the brick factory. 100-something yuan. Isn't that heavy in your pocket? I turned around, still hunched, still shaking inside the sheepskin coat. Please. Comrades. I was just selling a little game meat for medicine money. Cut the crap. The fat one spat on the ground. Hand over the money and the tickets, and we let you walk. Otherwise, he smacked his club against the wall with a bang. We break that bum leg of yours. They closed in, one in front, one behind, pinning me against the wall. In their eyes, I was already caught. What they didn't know was that under that ratty dog fur hat, I'd switched on my x-ray vision. I looked right through their coats. Scarface had a few big bills in his inner pocket and a longer spring-loaded knife hidden away. The fat one had a set of keys and a set of iron knuckles on his belt. Nothing else. No other weapons. No backup hiding behind the walls. Just these 2 pieces of garbage? The tension in my chest dissolved. If they wanted to play black on black, then they picked the wrong target. This place was deserted. Nobody watching. Why not add a little bonus to today's earnings? I stopped shaking. Slowly, I straightened my back. The hunch rose, vertebra by vertebra, with a soft cracking sound. The hat lifted higher. The cowering old man inflated like a balloon, shoulders widening, spine stretching, until a tall, broad-shouldered young man stood where the beggar had been. My face was still black with ash, but the body, the posture, the energy, completely different person. You, Scarface froze. His knife hand stopped mid-flip. Who the hell are you? I reached up, pulled off the hat, and tossed it onto a snowbank. Underneath was a young face. Hard. Cold. The face of someone who wasn't prey. Lend you money? My voice wasn't raspy anymore. Clear and sharp as a blade. Funny. I'm short on cash too. I rolled my wrists. My knuckles cracked one by one. How much you got on you? Go ahead. Empty your pockets. The game had flipped. The hunters just became the hunted. You're dead. Scarface was furious. He was a street veteran with real knife skills, and even though his old man target had suddenly turned into a young guy, he figured youth meant inexperience. He barked at his partner to block the exit, then flipped his folding knife into a reverse grip. No fancy moves. He lunged straight at my gut like a striking snake. A vicious stab aimed to spill my intestines. But in my eyes, everything changed. Vision on. The world slowed down. His thick coat turned transparent. I could see his arm muscles contracting, blood pumping faster through his veins. I could even see the path his knife would take, a faint red line drawn through the air. Straight thrust, lower left belly. Too slow. When the blade was 3 inches from my coat, I moved. Not backward, forward. I planted my left foot and twisted my right side just enough. The knife slid past me, cutting through a layer of sheepskin but missing flesh entirely. He'd overcommit. His weight carried him forward, off balance. That was my opening. I didn't block. I kicked. A side kick, aimed at the weakest point on his body, the side of his right knee, the leg holding all his weight. Crack. The sound of snapping bone echoed through the alley like a dry branch breaking. His scream barely left his throat before he collapsed sideways. His lower leg bent at an angle legs aren't supposed to bend. White bone poked through his torn pants. Blood poured out. One move. One down. That's what X-ray vision plus prediction does. The fat one was already charging with his metal wrap club raised high. He saw what happened to his partner and his hand started shaking, but he was already committed. No stopping now. I'll kill you. He swung the club at my head with his eyes shut. Pure panic. Pure force. Zero technique. I didn't even need to study him closely. My vision had already mapped every weakness. Arms too high, armpits wide open, legs soft and unsteady under all that fat. I didn't dodge. I stepped straight into him, closing the distance so fast his club could only graze my shoulder with no power behind it. My fist was already rising. An uppercut, launched from below like a cannonball, smashing into the bottom of his jaw. A deep thud, bone meeting bone. He didn't make a sound. His head snapped back, his whole body went stiff, and he toppled backward like a felled tree. Blood and broken teeth sprayed from his mouth. He hit the snow and his eyes rolled white. Out cold. From Scarface's first lunge to both men on the ground, less than 5 seconds. I stood there, let out a breath of white steam, and looked down at them. Scarface was curled around his shattered leg, rolling in the snow, face drenched in cold sweat. Too much pain to even scream anymore. Just pure terror in his eyes. I crouched down, picked up his dropped folding knife, and weighed it in my hand. Now, I said, let's talk about that loan. The blade caught the snow light and threw it across his twisted, agonized face. My expression was blank. Same as when I butchered rabbits in the mountains. Calm, precise, and merciless. Be big brother. Sir, I was wrong. I didn't know who I was messing with. He fumbled for his pockets with shaking hands. Take it all. Everything. Just don't kill me. He was truly terrified. That kick had been too fast for him to even see. He knew. This was someone trained, someone who'd drawn blood before. In a dead-end alley like this, a body buried in the snow wouldn't be found until spring thaw. Maybe not even then. I grabbed his collar and lifted him off the ground like a dead chicken. That money in your pocket is mine already, I said flatly. What I want now is your money. I shoved my hand into his coat, ripped open the lining pocket. A messy stack of bills, 1 10-yuan note, some ones, and a pile of small change. About 17 or 18 yuan total. Broke piece of trash. I stuffed it all in my own pocket. But I wasn't done. My vision had already shown me he was carrying something else. I felt along his belt. His hand rose to stop me. I gave him one look. His hand froze in midair. From a hidden pocket sewn into the inside of his belt, I pulled out a sheathed dagger. This was nothing like that cheap folding knife. This was forged from old bearing steel, thick blade, blood groove carved along the edge, the cutting edge glowing faintly blue. Rough craftsmanship, but absolutely deadly. 100 times better than my hatchet. Nice piece. My eyes lit up. I slid it straight into my boot. I dropped Scarface like garbage and moved to the unconscious fat one. Less to find on him. A ring of keys, a rusty set of iron knuckles, a few wrinkled grain tickets, and just over 3 yuan. I took it all. 21 yuan and 30 cents between the two of them. About a month's wages for a regular factory worker. Robbing robbers. Turns out that's the fastest way to get rich. I couldn't just leave these two lying in the open. Even wrecked like this, if someone found them or they recovered, they might come looking for payback. I spotted a mountain of frozen garbage and coal ash at the end of the alley. I grabbed Scarface's good leg and dragged him through the snow. W, what are you doing? He was shaking so bad he could barely talk. Finding you a warm spot. I swung him like a sack and tossed him into the stinking pile. Then I grabbed the fat one, still out cold, dead weight, and threw him on top. 2 grown men stacked up on rotten cabbage and cold dust. I kicked snow and broken baskets over them until they were half buried. The spot was sheltered from the wind, so they wouldn't freeze to death. But they'd wish they had. More than anything, this was humiliation, the kind that breaks something inside a man. Remember this, I said, standing over the pile, dusting off my hands. Scarface had one terrified eye peeking out from the garbage. Next time, look harder at who you're messing with. Some people are above your pay grade. I picked up the dog fur hat, put it back on, and the young killer vanished. The shuffling old man returned. I walked out of the dead end and melted into the thin stream of people on the street. Over 150 yuan in my coat, a steel dagger in my boot, and a fistful of ration tickets in my pocket. This black market trip had gone better than I could have dreamed. Time to spend some money. I found an empty public toilet, ducked inside, and stripped off the sheepskin disguise. Stuffed it into my space along with the hat. That outfit was burned now, too recognizable. I pulled out my own patched but clean cotton coat and washed the ash off my face with snow. Now I was just a regular village kid. Nobody special. I headed straight for the county supply co-op. The biggest store in town, 3 big tile-roofed buildings with a "Serve the People" sign over the door. Even in winter, the place was packed. The air inside hit me with a wall of smell, soy sauce, vinegar, pipe smoke, and face cream all mixed together. The counters were tall glass cases. The clerks behind them wore blue smocks and sleeve covers, faces dripping with the arrogance that came with being a shop worker, one of the 8 most respected jobs in the country. Everyone had to smile at them. I pushed through the crowd to the general goods counter. "Comrade, I need salt." I put my cloth bag on the counter. The clerk was a heavy woman cracking sunflower seeds and chatting. Didn't even look up. "How much?" "Got a ticket? Fill it up?" I slapped a salt ticket on the glass. She actually looked at me. "Fill it? This bag holds 5 pounds. You sure?" Even city factory workers didn't buy 5 pounds of salt at once. 5 pounds. She shrugged and scooped white crystals from the massive salt vat. The bag got heavy fast. 5 pounds of salt, enough for a whole year. Next stop, the fabric counter. A young woman was arranging bolts of cloth on the shelves. That blue and white cotton print. 6 feet. Please. The colors were bright and cheerful. Sue would look like a New Year's poster girl in a coat made from that. And 8 feet of that black work cloth. For me. Tough. Dark. Good for the mountains. The girl eyed me with doubt. "This fabric isn't cheap. You need cloth tickets too." I reached into my pocket and laid out a neat stack of bills and tickets on the glass counter. Big bills mixed with crumpled small ones. Her eyes lit up. A farm boy pulling out this kind of money? That didn't happen every day. "Right away, sir." Her attitude improved instantly. She measured, snipped, folded, crisp and professional. Then the snack counter. 1/2 pound of fruit candy, hard candies wrapped in clear cellophane, all different colors. Yaya was going to lose her mind. And 2 tins of clam cream, hand lotion for my sisters. Their little hands were cracked and bleeding from the cold. Broke my heart every time I saw it. I swept through that store like a man on a mission. Salt, fabric, candy, oil, sewing needles and thread. My arms got so full I had to duck into a corner and secretly pull some things into my space, keeping just enough in my hands to look normal. Other shoppers were staring. Whose kid is that? How's he got so much money? Looks like a farm boy from the clothes, but he's buying like it's free. That's fruit candy. I can't even afford that for my own grandkid. Jealous looks, curious looks, suspicious looks. I felt them all on my back like spotlights. Didn't care. Not one bit. This feeling, buying whatever I wanted, not counting every last penny, was incredible. That suffocating poverty, where every cent had to be split in two, was falling away behind me. Last stop, the hardware counter. That lock. I'll take it. I pointed at a big, heavy, black iron padlock behind the glass. Solid as a fist. Need an industrial coupon for that, the mail clerk said. I slapped one down. When that lock landed in my palm, the weight of it meant more than metal. This was the last line of defense for my home. With this lock and that reinforced door, I could finally go into the mountains without worrying every second about my sisters alone in the house. That's everything. I looked at the darkening sky. This trip had been a gold mine coming and going. Earned a fortune, spent it well, and still had plenty left. Time to go home. I shouldered my remaining bundle, pushed through the co-op doors, and walked into the wind and snow. My back was straighter than when I'd come. Once I was clear of the county and sure nobody was following, I stopped and straightened my back for the first time in hours. First thing I did was drop that crushing burlap sack off my shoulders. Cloth, 5 pounds of salt, that heavy iron lock, the whole thing weighed a ton. In town I had to carry it like a normal person, so nobody thought I was some kind of freak. Out here, no chance. Take. The sack vanished into my space. I swapped my regular coat for the sheepskin one. It stank, but it blocked the wind like nothing else. Walking home empty-handed and light as air. That's the joy of having a storage space. For everyone else, a 30-mile hike through snow is torture. For me, it was almost a stroll. I checked my inventory as I walked. One roe deer had been butchered and sold for that thick wad of cash. The other was still whole, frozen solid, floating in my space. Plus all the leftover ribs and scraps, enough to feed us well for a while. Only disappointment, no cotton at the co-op. Sold out. Suetsue's new coat would have to wait. I'd use the fabric as an outer layer for now, deal with the filling later. Before I knew it, the 30 miles were behind me. I could see the village chimney smoke and the crooked old willow at the entrance. Time to put on a show. I pulled off the sheepskin and changed back to my ragged cotton coat, the one that fit my poor orphan image. Then I brought the heavy sack back out of my space and set it on the snow. I rubbed snow on my face until it was red and raw, tilted my hat crooked, and covered myself in snow dust. Then I heaved the sack onto my shoulder, bent my back, and started gasping like I'd been carrying it for miles. Perfect. Walking back empty-handed, and then pulling supplies out of thin air inside the house would get me reported as a spy or a demon. Had to sell the performance all the way through. I shuffled into the village. A few neighbors spotted me and stared at the big sack. Wangyi, what's all that? Looks heavy. I played it up, panting hard. Nothing much. Picked through the junkyard in town. Some scrap metal and rags to patch the house. I kept walking, didn't let anyone get a close look, and went straight to my yard. Suetsue, open up. It's me. Silence. Then a cautious little voice behind the door, trembling slightly. Is that really you, brother? What do we lock the door with, smart girl? I grinned. The door bolt. Jujube wood. Now open up. I brought good stuff. The crossbar scraped aside. The door cracked open. Suetsue peeked out, saw it was really me, and threw the door wide. Brother, she ran into me, eyes red. Inside, quick. I hauled the sack in, and the first thing I did was hang that brand new iron padlock on the door bracket. Click. Locked. That sound, crisp and final, was the most beautiful thing I'd heard all day. Inside, the room was warm. Yaya popped out of the blankets like a little groundhog. Brother, you said you'd buy me candy. I did. I opened the sack on the bed. First out, 5 pounds of coarse white salt, poured straight into the empty jar until it was full to the brim. No more bland food. Then the fabric, a whole bolt of blue and white cotton print, and a length of tough blackwork cloth. Suetsue's eyes went wide. She reached out and touched the fabric, soft, thick, 1,000,000 times better than the reed fluff coat she was wearing. "This is for you," I said, pushing the flowered cloth into her arms. "Couldn't find cotton for the filling yet, but we'll make this into an outer jacket. It'll block the wind. Once I get cotton later, we'll redo the whole thing proper. Brother, it's so pretty." She couldn't stop stroking it. "And this," I unwrapped the fruit candies and peeled one open, popped it right into Yaya's mouth. Her eyes went enormous. The sweetness melted across her tongue, and her whole face scrunched up with happiness, little feet kicking under the blanket. "Sweet. Brother, it's so sweet." Last, I brought out the 2 tins of clam cream. I took Tsue's hand, covered in cracked, swollen frostbite sores, and gently rubbed the cream into her skin. That night, our crumbling little house was full of laughter for the first time in as long as I could remember. For dinner, I cut off a piece of roe deer tenderloin from my space, about 1.5 pounds, sliced it thin, rubbed it with the new salt, and stir-fried it in the pan. No onion, no garlic, no ginger, but pure wild game seasoned with real salt, alongside thick millet porridge. That was heaven. After we ate until we couldn't move, Tsue sat by the fire measuring the new cloth, already planning her jacket. I sat on the warm bed, pulled the steel dagger from my boot and wiped it clean, then counted through my stack of bills one more time. The weight of that money in my hands felt like solid ground under my feet, but it still wasn't enough. I looked out the window at the dark sky. Tomorrow was the 23rd of the 12th month, Little New Year's Eve. The village grain stores were running lower by the day. People were getting desperate. And deep in those mountains, a herd of wild boar was waiting for me. It was time to figure out how to go get them. Little New Year's Eve. A few firecrackers popped around the village from families who could afford to celebrate. We couldn't, but our house felt warmer than any holiday. Tsue was up early, hugging that blue and white fabric, planning to sew it into a jacket to wear over her ruined coat. Yaya sat on the bed sucking half a fruit candy, watching me work. I was bent over a pile of rusty wire I'd bought in town yesterday, snipping it into lengths with an old pair of pliers. "Brother, that wire's about to fall apart." "What's it good for?" Tsue asked. "New Year's gifts for the animals in the mountains. A hatchet and a dagger weren't enough for wild boar. Getting close to a few 100-pound pig meant risking my life. The smartest hunter lets the prey kill itself." I cut the wire into pieces over 1 meter long. Single strands were too weak. A boar would snap them instantly. So I twisted 3 strands together, using a stick as a handle while Tsue held the other end. The wires braided into a thick cable that wouldn't break no matter how hard I pulled. Then I made the snares, a dead knot on one end, the other end threaded through to form a sliding loop. The loop had to close fast the moment something pushed through it. I took some of the clam cream and rubbed it on the joints to keep them slippery. "Brother, that's for our faces," Tsue yelped. "This is for their faces," I said. I tested one on the bed frame. A flick of my wrist, and the loop snapped tight, biting deep into the wood. Once a boar got its neck or leg in there, nothing short of breaking its own neck would get it free. 5 big snares for boar, a few smaller ones for rabbits and deer. Then I carved some thick wooden stakes, sharpened on one end, notched on the other. Everything went into the sack. Dagger in my boot, coat tied tight. Tsue, lock the door. I'm heading into the mountains. Tonight we eat big." She held Yaya and watched me with worried eyes. "Be careful, brother. Don't worry. Your brother's tougher than ever." I bypassed the main road and cut through the grove behind the village. The outer area was picked clean. I needed to go deep. 5 miles in, the trees changed. Tall red pines and white birch blocked out the sky. Snow got so deep it reached my thighs in places. Nobody came out here. Even the old village hunters avoided it. Wolf packs and black bears roamed these woods. But I had my radar. Every few 100 meters I'd stop and scan with my vision. Within 100 meters, nothing alive could hide from me. I was looking for a boar trail. Wild pigs are creatures of habit. They use the same paths over and over, smashing through brush until they carve a permanent lane. Hunters call it a pig run. Half an hour in, I found it. Near a thick hazel grove, the bushes looked like a bulldozer had plowed through. Broken branches everywhere. And in the snow, fresh, deep, split-hoofed tracks. This morning's tracks. The herd had passed through here on its way to feed deeper in the forest. This was the spot. I picked a narrow gap between two big trees, the most likely path for the pigs heading home. I tied the steel cable snares to a thick pine root, checking with my vision to make sure the root was frozen deep into the earth. Solid as iron. An elephant couldn't pull it loose. I spread open the greased loop to about 16 inches across and hung it in the gap at exactly the right height, about 1.5 feet off the ground, neck level for a bore. I propped the loop open with a few dry grass stems so it kept its shape, then dusted everything with a layer of fresh snow. If you weren't looking for it, you'd never see the death trap hiding in that white corridor. I set 3 snares in a row, front, middle, back. Once the lead pig hit the first one, the rest would panic and stumble right into the others. My hands were frozen stiff by the time I finished. I rubbed them together and breathed warm air into my fists, looking at my handiwork with deep satisfaction. This was the trap and wait game. Just had to hold out until dark, when those greedy pigs came waddling home with full bellies. I straightened up, about to find a sheltered spot to wait, and my eyes caught something. An old dead locust tree on a nearby slope. Hollow trunk, standing alone in the snow. My heart slammed. That tree looked familiar. A few days ago, when I was hunting rabbits in the grove, my vision had caught a brief flash of metal deep underground. I'd been too focused on the hunt to investigate. But the location, the terrain, the type of tree, it all matched. Back then, I'd been looking from the edge of the grove toward the deeper forest. My vision had range, and it had tricked me into thinking the metal was farther out. But actually, the spot was right here, at the entrance to the deep mountains. This was the tree. I ran to it. The bark was cracked like fish scales, roots buried under thick snow. Nothing unusual on the surface. But to my eyes, it was an unopened treasure chest. I took a deep breath, focused every drop of mental energy, and pushed my vision down through the snow, through frozen black soil, through tangled roots. About 2.5 feet underground, wedged between the roots, there was a long rectangular object. An iron box, rusted nearly to nothing, but I could still make out the shape, a military ammunition or equipment case. Through the gaps in the rotting metal, I could see several dark tube-shaped objects lying inside, and what was left of a wooden stock crumbled to sawdust. Guns. Real guns. My blood rushed to my head. Rusted and disassembled, sure, but those were real gun parts. A weapon that could spit fire. I had to dig them out. Right now, I tried pulling the box into my space through the ground. Nothing happened. The space couldn't grab things through solid earth. I needed direct contact. I pulled the dagger from my boot and stabbed it into the frozen ground. Clang. Barely left a white scratch. This winter soil was hard as cast iron. Digging with a dagger alone would take until spring. I grabbed a leftover wooden stake from my space and used it as a hammer, pounding the dagger into the cracks in the frozen dirt like a chisel. Bang, bang, bang. Each hit rattled my hands numb. I stripped off my coat, working in just my shirt, steam rising off my body. 1 hour of brutal chiseling. The pit was knee-deep. My hands were torn and bleeding, but my eyes were brighter than ever. Then, a metallic ring. The dagger tip hit something hard. Not rock. Metal. I threw down the stake and dropped to my knees, clawing dirt with bare hands. The rusted iron box crumbled at my touch, revealing what was inside. Oilcloth wrapping, long since rotted away. But the grease had protected the contents. Rusty, yes, but the shapes were intact. A long barrel. A heavy bolt mechanism. A few scattered bullets covered in green corrosion. A disassembled rifle. From the barrel sleeve and the clip-fed design, I recognized it even without being an expert. A Hanyang Type 88, the old Chinese-made Mauser copy, probably buried by resistance fighters during the war against Japan. Someone hit it and never came back. The stock had rotted to mud. Useless. The barrel was clogged with rust. The bolt was frozen solid, wouldn't budge. In modern times, this was scrap metal. In my eyes, it was everything. Rust? I had all the time in the world to clean it inside my space. No stock. I had plenty of hardwood at home to carve one. As long as the main parts were still solid, as long as it could still fire, that was a death sentence for every wild boar on this mountain. My hands were shaking as I swept every piece into my space. I'd never felt this strong in my life. With this, nowhere in these mountains was off limits. Then I heard it, a sharp crack from the forest, a branch snapping. I pressed myself against the old tree, dagger ready, breath held. My vision scanned the direction of the sound. No boar, no person, just a dry branch broken by a gust of wind, dangling from a bush. I exhaled, but my frown deepened. The wind had changed. When I'd entered the mountains, it was a gentle breeze. Now it was screaming through the trees like a rabid dog. The sky overhead had turned from pale gray to heavy black, thick lead clouds pressing down. I knew this weather. Lived a whole lifetime in these mountains before. This was the warning sign of a white hair wind, a blinding blizzard. Once it hit, it wouldn't stop for days, maybe weeks. Time to leave. I wanted to stay and wait for the boar traps, but greed kills. If the storm caught me in the deep forest, even my space couldn't save me from freezing to death. But I wasn't leaving empty-handed. If the mountain was about to be sealed by snow, firewood meant life. Our stockpile looked decent, but burning through a real blizzard eats fuel fast. Run out at 40 below zero, and you're a frozen corpse. I grabbed my hatchet and went straight for the dead pine grove at the forest edge. My vision helped me pick out the driest, most resin-soaked trunks, torch wood, that catches instantly and burns long and hot. Chop, chop, chop. Trees fell. I didn't even look at them. Just waved my hand. Take. And they vanished into my space, stacking up neatly in the corner. The wood pile grew higher and higher until nearly half the space was packed. Enough. This would last until spring. I threw on my coat, shouldered a bundle of decoy firewood for show, and pushed through the rising wind toward home. The village was chaos when I arrived. The loudspeaker was shrieking, Chief Lu's voice cracking with urgency. Comrades. Weather report says massive blizzard. Reinforce your homes. Stock up firewood. Don't let the livestock freeze. People ran around like panicked ants. Some were on ladders patching roofs. Others pushed wheelbarrows toward the hills hoping to scavenge wood. A few were fighting over leftover wheat straw at the threshing ground. Early's roof just blew off. He's crying. We don't have enough firewood. What do we do? Misery everywhere. I walked through the crowd with my bundle on my shoulder, face blank. Inside my house, warmth hit me at the door. Suetsue was on the bed sewing with Yaya beside her. Brother, the wind is terrifying out there. We're fine. I dropped the firewood, locked the gate tight, and came back inside. I pulled a rabbit from my space and slapped it on the table. Tonight we're making stew. Suetsue and Yaya's eyes went huge. Outside, people were panicking about freezing and starving. Behind our locked door, we were cooking meat. Both rabbits. Suetsue swallowed hard. Both. All of it. I started sharpening the knife. Fat in the belly keeps the body warm. Let the storm rage. It can't get through our walls. The pot boiled. Meat smell filled the room. Outside, the wind howled like ghosts and wolves. Fine snow pellets started hitting the window, hissing against the paper. The blizzard had arrived. I sat on the warm bed watching my sister's rosy cheeks, listening to the desperate shouting outside, and felt a kind of safety I'd never known in either lifetime. This was what being reborn meant. This was the power of knowing what's coming before it hits. But I couldn't fully relax. I looked toward the boarded-up window, and in my mind I could see through the storm, 30 miles deep into the mountains. My traps were out there. If this snow kept falling and I didn't go collect them, they'd be buried. Anything caught in them would either freeze solid under the snow where I'd never find it, or get eaten by wolves. My grip tightened on my chopsticks. Tomorrow morning, before the road sealed completely, I had to make one more trip. The storm raged all night. By morning, snow was piled half a foot high against our door. Visibility was maybe 50 meters. The whole world had turned white and blind. Brother, you're going out? Suetsue saw me tying grass rope around my legs and went pale. The chief said nobody should leave. People will freeze to death. Just checking the back hill. Won't go far. I lied. I tucked the dagger in the best spot on my belt, checked my dried food, and gave her the usual orders. Lock everything. Open for nobody. The door was half blocked by snow, so I just jumped over the yard wall. Easier that way. Outside the village, The wind was vicious. Only someone young and strong with a full belly and a storage space full of food would be crazy enough to go out in this. Anyone weaker would freeze stiff within 2 miles. I pushed through knee-deep snow, step by agonizing step. Yesterday's footprints were gone, buried. But my vision cut through the snow to read the landmarks underneath. That crooked tree, that big blue rock. Still there. 5 miles. Usually a 30-minute walk. Today it took 90 minutes. By the time I reached the pine forest, ice was crusting my eyebrows and every breath came out as white fog. I ducked behind a tree to shelter from the wind and turned on my vision. Through the storm, through the trees, I found the old locust tree, my reference point. Then I shifted my gaze left, toward the boar trail where I'd set my snares yesterday. My heart slammed. Something was there. The hidden corridor was torn apart. Bushes flattened like a truck had rolled through. And right in the middle, where my main snare was set, a dark shape lay half buried in the snow. Not a rock. That was meat. Living meat. I forgot how tired I was and charged through the snow. It poured into my boots, and I didn't care. Every drop of blood in my body was on fire. As I got close, the dark shape heard me and lurched. Grah, a wild boar. Not the biggest, maybe 100 pounds, a yearling with coarse yellow-brown fur. But mean as hell. The steel cable was buried deep in its neck, cutting through the thick hide and bristles into a bloody groove. It must have hit the snare in the middle of the night and thrashed for hours. The snow around it was churned into a crater, bushes gnawed and broken. The second it saw me, rage took over. It squealed and launched itself straight at me, hooves digging into the ground. The cable snapped taut like a guitar string. The pig was yanked backward mid-charge, flipped, and hit the snow hard. It scrambled up and tried again. That's wild boar for you. Stubborn until the last breath. I stopped 5 meters away. No fear, just the pure joy of a hunter looking at his harvest. 100 pounds of meat. With the whole village running out of food and a blizzard sealing every door, this was a mountain of gold delivered to my feet. Stop fighting. I drew the dagger. The blade caught the gray snowlight. If this had been a 300-pound boar king, or a whole herd, I'd have climbed a tree and waited. But one exhausted yearling with a cable halfway through its throat? If I couldn't handle this, I didn't deserve a second life. I circled to the side, staying clear of its tusks. The cable held its neck. It couldn't turn well. It snorted and glared at me with blood-red eyes, but I could see through its body. The wire had crushed its windpipe. Every struggle was choking it faster. This pig was running on pure fury and nothing else. Close enough. I leaped. My boots landed on its spine. 140 pounds of me plus the drop pinned the exhausted animal flat into the snow. It thrashed beneath me, bristles stabbing like needles, hooves kicking mud and snow into my face. I grabbed its ear with my left hand and wrenched its head back, forcing the neck up. The throat stretched open, and through my vision, the carotid artery pulsed fat and red just under the skin. No hesitation. The dagger punched into the hilt. I twisted my wrist and ripped sideways. One cut. Windpipe and artery, both severed clean. The screaming stopped instantly. Hot blood erupted, painting the white snow red in a spreading circle. It splashed across my face and hands, thick and metallic. The pig shuddered violently, then went soft. The red faded from its eyes. I held it down until every twitch stopped. Done. I stood up, wiped blood off my face, and looked down at the steaming carcass. Over 100 pounds. Carrying this back would kill me, and the blood smell would bring wolves from miles around. But I had my cheat code. The storm was so thick you couldn't see past a few meters. Nobody else was out here. I pressed my palm against the pig's head. Take. Gone. The entire carcass vanished, leaving nothing but a pool of red on churned-up snow. Inside my space, the boar floated quietly in the corner, keeping company with the roe deer. I covered the blood with kicked-up snow, untied the steel cable, too valuable to leave, and cleaned up fast. The adrenaline was wearing off and cold was creeping back into my bones. Time to go. Any longer, and the snow would bury me too. I tightened my collar, found my bearings, and pushed into the wind toward home. Empty-handed on the outside, but inside I was overflowing. With this pig plus the deer I already had, We didn't just have enough meat to survive the storm. We had enough to last through New Year, past the holiday, and well into the new year. And this pig was more than just meat. The hide, the bones, even the bladder, everything was useful. On the way back, I could barely keep my eyes open against the driving snow. But my mind was already on the next project. The gun. Being stuck inside during the blizzard was the perfect time. I needed to strip every rusted part, clean them, and see what I was working with. The dagger was fine for a 100-pound yearling tied to a rope. But if I ever faced that herd of full-grown boars, 200 or 300 pounds each, a knife wasn't going to cut it. Fix the rifle, and no corner of these mountains would be off limits. I made it back to the village as darkness fell. Every house was sealed shut, not a soul outside. I jumped over my own wall. Light glowed faintly from our window. "Brother?" Suetsue's voice came through the door crack. "Open up. I'm back." She heard the exhaustion in my voice, and something else, excitement. The door opened. I stumbled in, covered in snow and wind. "Brother, there's blood on you." Suetsue spotted the stains on my sleeve instantly, face going white. "Are you hurt?" "Not my blood. It's pig blood." I locked the door, bolted it. Then, right in front of both my sisters, I waved my hand. Thud! 100+ pounds of wild boar materialized on the dirt floor, hitting so hard the ground shook. Dead silence for one heartbeat. Then Yaya's shriek split the air. "Pig! Big pig! Meat, meat, meat!" Suetsue covered her mouth. Tears poured down her cheeks. A whole pig. This winter, we had nothing left to fear. The blizzard didn't stop for 3 days. Our door stayed shut the whole time, but inside we were living better than anyone in the village. The fire burned strong, red pine from the deep mountains, full of resin, hot and long-lasting. Our 3 little rooms were toasty warm. "Brother, these bones smell amazing," Yaya said, her little nose twitching over a big iron basin of steaming pork spine and leg bones. I'd stripped most of the meat off the boar and stored it frozen in my space, but the bones still had plenty of tendon and scraps clinging to them. With our new salt, the broth turned white and thick, floating with a golden layer of pork fat. I fished out a piece of crunchy cartilage for Yaya. "Chew bones, grow tall." Suetsue sat in her new blue and white jacket sipping broth with chopped dried greens in it. Her cheeks were pink, partly from the steam, partly from finally having real nutrition. If anyone outside could have seen us, their jaws would have hit the floor. Because out there, the village was starving. This wasn't a guess. It was cold fact. Most families had run out of food before the storm even started. They'd been counting on relief grain from the commune, or scrounging firewood and wild plants from the hillside. But 3 days of nonstop snow had sealed every door shut. Nobody could get anywhere. Next door, Uncle Changue's house had gone quiet. His chimney barely smoked, probably running out of firewood too. The educated youth camp was worst. Those city kids sent down to the countryside had never done real farm work. Low work points meant low grain rations. They'd traded some of their food for toothpaste and soap. Now they had nothing. Through a crack in the window, I could see a few of the male youths huddled under the old elm tree at the village entrance, hacking at its bark with axes. They were stripping off the outer layer to get at the white inner bark underneath, grind it to powder, boil it with weeds into paste. Famine food. It barely digests and you can't pass it for days, but it beats dying. Watching those kids who usually look down on people like me now fighting a tree for survival, I felt nothing. No pity. Because I knew this was only the beginning. When hunger really drives people mad, tree bark is just the first step. After that, their eyes start moving from bark to other people. I turned away, cleared the bones into my space, and pulled out some sliced boar meat. "We're making dumplings tonight." Suetsue almost dropped her bowl. "Brother, do we have flour?" "We have millet." I brought out what was left of the bag. Millet dough for the skin, pork for the filling. Not as fine as wheat flour, but right now, this was an emperor's meal. I refused to live small. If heaven gave me a second life and these powers, then I was going to live like it meant something. What happened outside my walls, as long as it didn't come for me, wasn't my problem. The dumplings had just hit the boiling water when someone knocked. Soft, careful, rhythmic. Everyone froze. Suetsue and Yaya stared at the door. "Eat," I said, setting down my bowl. I I slid the dagger into my boot, pulled on my coat, and went to the door without opening it. Who? Is Comrade Wang Yi home? A woman's voice. Pretty sounding, but shaking, half crying. From the youth camp. I recognized it. Su Wan, the city girl. Good looking, always walking around with her chin up, treating farm boys like me as if we were dirt under her shoes. What do you want? My voice was ice. It's Su Wan. The youth camp. We've run out of food. Her voice got smaller. Everyone's about to pass out from hunger. I saw your chimney still smoking. Could you lend us something to eat? When the snow stops and the commune gives out grain, we'll pay you back double. Lend grain. In a famine, that's the same as lending your life. I almost laughed. Double? When would the commune hand out grain? Could be months. And with their pitiful work points, what would they pay back with? But I didn't refuse outright. These kids were sent here by the government. If a few of them starved to death at my doorstep, that was a problem for me too. And I couldn't look too heartless. People would start guessing I had a big stockpile. Wait, I grabbed 3 black corn buns from my space. I kept these specifically for situations like this, inspections, emergencies. They were mostly wild greens and rice husks, so rough they scraped your throat going down. But right now, they counted as food. I cracked the door open just wide enough to stick one hand through. 3 female youths stood outside. Su Wan was in front, face deathly pale, lips purple, shaking inside her army coat. Her eyes lit up when she saw my hand, then dimmed when she saw what was in it. 3 frozen, rock-hard black buns. Take them, I said through the crack. No warmth in my voice. This is all I have. We're almost out too. Scrape these from the bottom of the barrel. She stood there, stunned. The city princess who'd never been treated this way in her life. Wang Yi, could you at least give us some hot water? Another girl begged. No, take it or leave it. I started closing the door. We'll take them. Su Wan snatched the buns with frozen fingers. Hard as rocks. But they were food. Thank you, she whispered, head down, tears building. From the cold or from shame, I couldn't tell. Don't come back. I shut the door and bolted it. Through the door, I heard them shuffle away through the snow, holding each other up. No guilt. In a world ruled by survival, kindness has a price. Those 3 buns were already more than generous. If I'd let them inside and they'd seen the pork dumplings on the table, the firewood stacked high. The consequences would be worse than wolves breaking into the village. Are they gone? Suetsue asked quietly. Gone. I sat back down, picked up a steaming dumpling, and bit into it. From now on, anyone who comes asking for food, we have nothing. Understand? Understood. But giving away even 3 buns in a starving village was a signal. Wang Yi has food. And the person who caught that signal was exactly who I expected. Uncle Changue. His family had truly run dry. His broken teeth were still swollen, his face half-caved from hunger. Whatever food they'd had, he and his 2 lazy sons had eaten it in 2 days. The commune had nothing to give either. He'd been watching my house from his window this whole time. That little bastard. He is hiding food, poison in his eyes. He hated me. For breaking his teeth, for getting Erliu sent to the labor camp, and now for having food while his own family starved. But he didn't dare come alone. The memory of that flying knife and Erliu's fate kept him frozen. So he went the other way. Not force, manipulation. He dragged his family out and went door to door, collecting the most pitiful people in the village. Widow Zhao, old man Li the welfare case. All the hungriest, weakest, most sympathetic faces he could find. Sisters, uncles, we can't just sit here and die, he told them, his voice dripping with fake concern. I heard Wang Yi has food. He gave buns to the youth camp girls. He's one of our own. If we all go together and ask nicely, he can't just watch his own village elders starve, can he? Moral blackmail. That was his weapon. He wasn't going himself. He was pushing the village's most helpless people to the front. Nobody punishes a crowd. And he was betting I wouldn't pull a knife on a bunch of starving grandmothers and orphans. By the time the group reached my gate, there were over a dozen people. Old, young, thin as sticks, standing in the blowing snow looking like they might collapse any second. Changue hid in the back. He nudged his wife Zhang Dajiao, and she started wailing at the top of her lungs. Wang Yi, dear nephew, have mercy on your auntie. We're all going to die? Please, share something with us. Her screeching brought the whole neighborhood to their windows. I was cleaning up dishes inside. Vision on, through the door. A ring of people around my gate. Changwei's family lurking behind. In front, every widow, orphan, and old-timer in the village, used as human shields. Clever bastard. My eyes went cold. A flash of killing intent. This was a siege using pity as a battering ram. If I opened the door and gave food today, tomorrow the entire village would come. They'd eat through everything I had. And once people knew what I was hiding, the trouble would never end. But refusing? With those half-frozen old folks and children outside. If things got ugly and the crowd forced their way in. I put down the bowl, pulled the dagger, weighed it in my hand, put it back. Couldn't use a blade on victims being used as pawns. Had to use my brain. And something sharper. I had to expose the puppet master hiding behind them. Sue, hide the leftover dumplings. I went to the back and scraped together a basin of old rice husk powder. The stuff people only fed to pigs in the worst years. Eat it and your throat feels like sandpaper, and you won't be able to use the toilet for days. I mixed the husk powder with cold water into a gray paste. Then I picked up the basin and walked to the front door. You want food? I threw the door wide open. Come in and eat. Eat. I held out the basin of gray husk paste and pushed it toward them. You said you're starving. You said you came to borrow food. This is what me and my sisters are eating today. Whoever's hungry, go ahead. All you can eat. The crowd went dead silent. Zhang Dajiao, who'd been wailing like someone died, froze with her mouth hanging open. Uncle Changwei's face twitched. He was shaking with rage. He'd smelled it. Every day for 3 days, he'd caught the scent of meat from my house. There was no way this pig slop was all I had. You little bastard, he shoved to the front, spit flying. You think we're stupid? I smelled meat from your house. You hid the good stuff, and you're trying to shut us up with this garbage. That lit the fuse. The starving villagers behind him, eyes already red with hunger, heard the word, meat, and the dying spark of hope flared back up. He's got meat. He just doesn't want to share. Rush him. No way his house is empty. Uncle's oldest son Wang Debeo, big, fat, and brainless, let out a yell and charged straight at my door. Move. I'm searching this place. His dirty hand was inches from my collar. I didn't dodge. I set the basin down in the snow. My right hand swung behind me to the corner just inside the door. The axe. I brought it around in one smooth arc, straight down toward his reaching hand. If it had connected, that hand would have come off at the wrist. Debeo's soul nearly left his body. He yanked his arm back so hard he slipped and crashed onto his backside in the snow. Thunk. The axe buried itself 3 inches deep into the jujube wood door frame. The whole frame shuddered. I held the pose, one hand on the handle, head slowly rising. My eyes had nothing in them. Black and empty as a wolf den in the deep mountains. Who else wants to search? Debeo sat in the snow, a dark stain spreading across his pants, screaming, "Murder! He's trying to kill me." Uncle Changwei swallowed so hard I could hear it. This kid really would kill someone. Uncle. I pulled the axe free, with chips scattering. I stepped over the threshold, axe in hand, and scanned the crowd. Every person my eyes touched stumbled backward. All that brave talk about charging and evaporated like breath in the cold. I was just passing by. One old farmer stammered, backing away. I don't need anything. I'm going. One broke, and the rest followed. The whole crowd scattered like startled birds. Nobody wanted to die for a meal. Wang Yi, just you wait. This is sabotaging unity. I'm reporting you to the commune. Uncle yelled as he retreated. Go, I said, pointing the axe toward the village entrance. Go now? They close early. His face turned the color of liver. He stomped his foot, dragged his pants-wetting son off the ground, and ran. The doorstep was empty. Quiet again. I watched them disappear, then went back inside and slammed the door. Lock clicked shut. Setsue was white as paper, gripping a pair of scissors in both hands. Brother, it's over. I tossed the axe back on the chopping block. The killer look melted off my face, and I smiled. People like that only understand one language. You try being nice, they climb on your head. Show them the axe, and suddenly they remember their manners. Come on, let's finish those dumplings. That night, the snow finally stopped. 3 days of blizzard, done. The clouds tore apart, and a pale moon came through, lighting the snow so bright it looked like daytime. But it was a dead kind of bright. And cold, the kind of cold that cracks stones. The village was silent as a grave. Even the dogs were hiding. I couldn't sleep. I lay on the bed, turning the dagger in my hands. The room was warm, but my hunter's instinct was screaming. Something was coming. The famine wasn't just starving people. The animals in the mountains were starving worse. 3 days of blizzard had locked every small creature underground. The predators at the top of the food chain had nothing left to eat. When the mountains go empty, their noses turn toward the village, toward the smell of humans and livestock. AWOZO, a long, wailing howl from the wasteland near the village entrance. It stretched across the silent sky and made my scalp crawl. Not a dog. Wolf. I sat up like a cat, silent, instant. Suetsue stirred but didn't wake. I tucked the blanket around her and padded barefoot to the window. Then, from the east end of the village, frantic barking. Old Man Lee's big yellow dog. That dog was the meanest in the village, but now its bark was shrill with terror. The barking peaked into one short, horrible scream. Then the sounds of tearing and dragging. I opened my vision. At the edge of my range, 2 blurry green dots were moving fast across the snow near the east end. Wolf eyes. Wolves inside the village. More than one. I gripped the dagger. But I didn't move. The wolves weren't at my door, and I wasn't about to risk my life for someone else's dog. In this world, you sweep the snow from your own step. That's how you stay alive. But the wolves weren't satisfied with one scrawny dog. Blood makes predators bolder. They followed the wind toward a stronger smell, the commune livestock shed behind the village headquarters. That shed held the village's most precious possessions, 1 old yellow ox and 2 donkeys. Without them, there would be no spring plowing. Without plowing, the entire village would starve next year too. A deep, desperate bellow from the ox. The crack of wooden fencing breaking. Donkeys shrieking. The wet sound of fangs tearing through hide. Lights flickered on, house by house. Wolves. Wolves are here. Get up. The livestock shed. The night watchman's cracked voice and his battered gong echoed through the village. The whole village exploded awake. I stood at the window watching torchlight and flashlight beams swinging near the commune building. This was bigger than a neighbor's problem now. If those animals died, the fields couldn't be worked. If the fields weren't worked, everyone died. This was about survival for every person in the village. Brother, Suetsue woke up shaking, clutching the blanket. What's happening? Wolves got in. Stay here. Lock the door. I'm going to take a look. Don't go. They're wolves. Relax. I pulled the hatchet off the wall and smiled cold. They're not here to fight. They're here to deliver meat. I was just wondering how to get more meat without raising suspicion. And here it comes, walking right to me. By the time I reached the commune yard, the scene was chaos. Dozens of villagers stood in a loose half-circle, torches throwing red light across the bloody snow. They held hoes, shovels, sticks, and every single one of them was shaking. Nobody dared step forward. The livestock fence was half-collapsed. Blood everywhere. 2 massive gray wolves were locked onto the old ox. One had its jaws clamped on a back leg. The other hung from the ox's neck, fangs buried deep in muscle. The ox bellowed, thrashing its head, hooves gouging deep trenches in the snow. But it was too old, too weak from a winter of hunger. It couldn't shake them. The 2 donkeys were collapsed in the corner, paralyzed with terror. Hit them. Somebody hit them. Chief Lu was out in his coat, stamping his feet, waving his pipe. That's the commune's ox. That's our lives. Chief, we can't. Look at those eyes. Where's Zhao Daho? The militia captain. He has a gun. The bolt's frozen. It won't pull back. Zhao was dripping sweat, wrestling with the old rifle. The cold had solidified the gun oil. The weapon was useless. Chief Lu grabbed a shovel and tried to charge in himself. I'll fight this beast myself. Several men hauled him back. Chief, that's suicide. Then everything got worse. The male wolf released the ox's neck and whipped around to face the crowd. Blood-soaked fangs bared. A low, rattling growl from deep in its throat. Its eyes were cunning and savage. It had read the crowd perfectly. These humans were terrified. One lunge, and they'd break. It's looking at us. Run. The front line shattered. Men dropped their tools and bolted. The circle collapsed instantly. Fear spread like wildfire. The primal terror of prey facing a predator ripped through every starving, weak-legged farmer in that yard. The male wolf's eyes flashed with something like contempt. Its back legs coiled. It was going to spring. Its target wasn't the ox anymore. It was the old man who'd been yelling the loudest, Chief Lu. Lu saw the gray shape launch into the air. His mind went blank. He closed his eyes. The impact never came. A sharp whistle cut the air. Crack. The wolf's head snapped sideways in midair. Its body lost all direction and slammed into the snow, tumbling several times before stopping. Jammed into its left eye socket was a chunk of frozen earth, driven so deep that half its face had caved in. It screamed, a horrible, agonized howl, and thrashed on the ground, blinded and crazed with pain. Everyone froze. Then every head turned. The crowd split apart on its own, opening a path. A young man in a ragged cotton coat walked through, hatchet tucked in his belt, tossing another frozen dirt chunk up and catching it in one hand. His face showed nothing. His eyes were colder than the wolf's. Everybody move. You're in the way of my meal. The male wolf was still rolling on the ground, howling. The frozen dirt had shattered its eye socket. Half its face was caved in, blood and brain leaking out. The female wolf let go of the ox's neck. She felt the threat. Not the torches, not the crowd. Something sharper. I walked forward. Slow. Steady. Snow crunching under my boots. I didn't look at the crippled male. My eyes locked on the female. The villagers pulled back like a tide. Nobody dared breathe loud. Chief Lu had fallen into the snow, pipe dropped, staring at me like he'd never seen me before in his life. This wasn't the quiet kid who never spoke up. This was a drawn blade. I passed the militia captain. Zhao Dao. If the bolt's frozen, piss on it to thaw it. Standing there holding a stick. Who's that supposed to scare? His face went red. He wanted to argue, but his throat was dry. He was the man in charge of village defense, and when the wolf charged, his legs had turned to jelly. He hadn't even tried to use his bayonet. I didn't wait for an answer. I walked to the center of the yard, 5 meters from the female wolf. She crouched low, growling deep in her throat. She didn't run. A starving predator doesn't see a man. It sees a bigger piece of meat. Her back legs coiled. Claws dug into the frozen ground. She was going to leap. I stopped. My right hand reached behind me and drew the hatchet. Black blade, bright edge. My left hand gripped the steel dagger inside my sleeve, reversed, hidden. Long blade for defense. Short blade for the kill. Wolves have iron skulls and steel spines, but their bellies are soft as tofu. And they're faster than any man. I needed the hatchet to keep her off me and the dagger to finish her. Come on. I lifted my chin at her. Pure provocation. She launched. Hind legs exploded off the ground, snow flying. A gray blur, stinking wind in my face, fangs aimed straight at my throat. Women in the crowd screamed. Some covered their eyes. They thought I was dead. The wolf was in the air. Fast. So fast. But my world had changed. Vision on. Time stretched. Wind froze. Snow hung motionless. The wolf wasn't a gray blur anymore. She was transparent. I could see every muscle fiber twisted tight like steel cable, her heart hammering, blood slamming through her veins. I could see how deep every fang was rooted in her jaw. And I could see her trajectory. Front claws reaching for my shoulders. Jaws aiming for my carotid artery. A perfect killing pounce. If I stepped back, she'd land and tear my legs apart. If I blocked, the impact would knock me down. No retreat. No block. I needed a kill point. Her weakness was the belly, the eyes. But in a head-on charge, the belly was too slow to reach. The eyes were too small a target on a flying animal. Unless, my vision looked through her open jaws, past the fangs, deep into her throat. Soft tissue leading straight to the brain stem and spine. One chance. A fraction of a second. I moved. I didn't swing the hatchet at her head. She'd deflect it with her paws. Instead, I did something nobody expected. I dropped. Knees hit the ground, body leaning back, and I slid forward across the snow, right under her.